All right, so I'm going to call our meeting to order. It is 5:31 p.m. For attendance, we do have all trustees in attendance in one way or another. We do have Trustee LeClaire, Trustee Olmsted, and Trustee Sipcar on the phone, joining us on the phone this evening. And grateful to welcome the rest of us in person here. I want to acknowledge that we have two new colleagues with us today and a third new colleague. Want to welcome Malik McCowie and Paige Hawkins, our two newest student trustees, to our first meeting this year. So you guys get to do a meeting before you start your first day of class. It's a heck of a year for you, so welcome. We'll try to take it easy on you tonight and ease you right into that school year starting in a week or so. I also want to acknowledge Sash Korbach, who is our newest superintendent. Superintendent Korbach is with us this evening for his first meeting as well. And we'll try to take it slightly less easy on you, but we'll get there. So thanks you to everyone for making yourselves available for this special meeting. I know that it was called rather quickly. And we are live streaming on YouTube, so this will be up on our board YouTube page. This is a special meeting called at the request of the majority of trustees to deal with some issues that we felt were time sensitive and couldn't wait until our September 21st first board meeting. On that note, we're at approval of the agenda, trustees, and I got a last-minute request this evening from Madame Leboeuf, through Madame Leboeuf, to add a last-minute speaker to our agenda this evening. I know we don't have a speakers list on our agenda tonight. We don't have any delegates because it is a special meeting. However, this request did come in from Mr. Gino Faka, and so I'm wondering at approval of the agenda if we would be amenable to adding Mr. Faka as a speaker to our agenda, and he would be our new D. He would be coming in and speaking for 5 minutes. So he would become our new D, and then D would move down to E, and we would have an E1, E2, E3, and then F at adjournment. So I'm putting that motion on the floor, seconded by Trustee Cook. So I'm just looking for support in amending that on the agenda. Support on the phone?
Support.
Appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. There is one additional thing, and this is not on the agenda. However, because we're in COVID times, Mr. Faka has requested to come in person and speak to us in person this evening. Now, owing to the fact that we all came here with the expectation that it would just be those of us in the room here tonight, I want to make sure that we're all safe and feeling secure here in the room, that if we were to invite someone else into the room to be able to do his presentation here in person, that we would all feel comfortable doing so. Mr. Faka will be able to give his presentation over the phone, should anyone not be comfortable with that, but I wanted to make sure we added that little extra layer of security for those of us who have kind of come back to these meetings in person and with a little bit of whatever health anxiety we may have. So I'm just looking for consensus. If anyone has any opposition to this, it will be respected, and Mr. Faka will still be able to speak to us. Trustee Hatfield.
Thank you. I wondered what the room capacity was, and in my situation, I did inquire yesterday about whether or not there would be a crowd in the room today, which was helping me make my decision on whether to be in person or not. So this is taking me by surprise because I was told something different. But anyway, what's the room capacity?
Through you, Madam Chair, the room capacity is 22. I think we're about 21, are we? I'm trying to think. Somebody want to count?
We're at 20.
20, okay. That would mean, one person.
And I appreciate that, Trustee Hatfield, which is why I wanted to put it to the Assembly, and nobody should feel pressured. We're not silencing Mr. Faka. We've already got him as an amendment on our approval of the agenda. I just wanted to make sure that everybody felt comfortable with whatever decision that we made here tonight. I know it's a little off to the left of our agenda tonight, but I wanted to take precautions as much as we could and not to make anybody here feel uncomfortable with what we had going on. Trustee Halberstadt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not exactly sure what you're proposing, to invite Mr. Faka into the chambers. Yeah, I would support that for sure.
Trustee Hatfield, you should not feel pressured into it at all. We are allowing him to speak to us, and I feel comfortable giving him a phone number and allowing him to make his presentation over the phone to us.
I'll go along with the majority.
So I'm just looking for consensus. If anyone is strongly opposed. So hearing no strong opposition, I thank you. I know it's a lot to ask. I know it's sprung on people at the last minute. And I want to make sure that, I mean, we have a long list tonight of ways that we are protecting our staff and our students. You are my colleagues. I count you among my my friends and my colleagues and our staff, and I want to make sure that everybody here feels comfortable. I want to make sure that everybody here gets the information that they need in a safe manner, just as we're going to be doing for our students when they come back to us. That will be respected, and I'm very grateful for everybody adjusting as we kind of move forward here with this special meeting. I know it kind of came on at the last minute among all the things that are happening both to us here in Greater Essex and throughout the province as we move forward. So I just want to thank everybody. I know it's a lot to take on, and so I appreciate everybody's. Thank you. So do I have any more amendments to the approval of this agenda this evening? Seeing and hearing none, we moved this approval of the agenda. Thank you. Seconded by Trustee Cook, all in support of the agenda as amended. Anyone on the phone opposed? Thank you guys so much. All right, so for anybody following along at home or in here, we have gone off C. We are on D. We'll have a 5-minute presentation from Gino Faka. If you can have some patience with us while we get Mr. Faka in. So Mr. Faka will, as all of us have had to do, will complete his COVID assessment. He will be masked. So all of our students will have to complete, all of our students and staff, and all of us here, trustees, have to complete our COVID assessment before we come into the building to make sure that we keep us safe. It's part of our safety protocols, which you'll see in the report that you've got in front of you this evening. One of many. I know these things are changing very rapidly. We just received some changes this afternoon from the ministry that will happen. So we're trying to bring you kind of the latest of the information that we have. I know parents and students and all community members are really anxious to hear what our plans are for reopening. We are too. And we are anxious to have our students back and our staff back very safely. Thank you to all of our staff and to our admin that are sitting here today after a full day of PD. We did welcome our staff back today for their first day of professional development. And they'll be doing that over the next few days in preparation for this return to school. And we're very grateful to all of the participants, all of the presenters, and everybody who's kind of working furiously behind the scenes to make that happen. For everyone. So I want to thank everybody for that as well. We'll just wait patiently for Mr. Faka to join us. He'll have 5 minutes. Go ahead, Trustee Hatfield.
Thank you. So just going back to my point about the room capacity and all that, I just want to get some assurance that going forward, because it does affect my ability to attend in person. So I want to know if we will be maintaining the room capacity as long as those restrictions are in place, or if trustees can override that because they want to let someone come in and speak.
I thank you for that question. So we will not be overriding the room capacity. Room capacity is set forward by our restrictions under the by our public health unit and by what's allowed under the laws. We don't know at this point what our restrictions may turn out to be. At this point, the room capacity is 22. Should the room capacity rise because our case numbers get better and the health unit advises us that we can, we will rise it at that time. If it turns out that we have to lower it, we will do that as well. This is an exception largely because there was no speakers list and no delegations on this agenda, and we've added that one. So I appreciate the last minute nature of it. I want to reassure you that the room capacity limits, just as they are tonight, will be respected, and we won't be going over our room capacity limits throughout. I'll have to read that. Actually, thank you. Trustee Sartori reminded me we haven't read our land acknowledgement, so thank you very much. I'll take a minute to read that now. Thank you for reminding me. So we acknowledge that we are on land and surrounded by water, originally inhabited by Indigenous peoples who have traveled this area since time immemorial. This territory is within the lands honored by the Wampum Treaties, agreements between the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenni Lenape, and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Specifically, we would like to acknowledge the presence of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ojibwe, the Odawa, the Potawatomi, and the Huron-Wendat peoples. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture while remaining committed to moving forward respectfully with all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. I think that might have been right on time. Mr. Faka? Welcome, Mr. Faka, this evening.
Thank you.
You will have 5 minutes, and then after which trustees will be able to ask questions of clarification to our speaker this evening. So I'm going to start my timer whenever you begin, and you'll have 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just let me get this thing fired up. Hello. That sucks. Oh, there it is.
Sorry, Mr. Faka, how close are we here?
Just opening up a file here. My printer, the cartridges were dried up because I never use it. All right, so there was a letter put out by the board and WEXA, all three boards in WEXA, right? And I rebutted to that letter. And part of that was to do with the helmets, the coaching staff, and the time required for practice sessions. So what I did is I went in and I went to the OFIA site, which is the safety standards for student athletics in high schools in Ontario. And I put the corresponding information onto this letter. So I could send this to everyone after the meeting. And one of the statements that were made, this decision was not made lightly, but was made in the best interest of the safety of our students, which is our top priority. So I responded, if student safety was a top priority, then helmet certification would have shown due diligence on behalf of the board, and the helmets would have been shipped in January, allowing plenty of time for refurbishment. One of the main determining factors, this was the part of the letter sent to me, one of the main determining factors in this decision has to do with the helmet safety. The Ontario Physical Education Association recommends football helmets are required to be certified on an annual basis. And it would take 6 or more weeks for the certification process. So in the OFIA legislation here, it talks about the football helmets need to be inspected annually by the equipment manager, trained coach, or reconditioning company. But it also defers back to the manufacturer's recommendation. And the manufacturer in Ontario has recommended every 2 years. So what we've been doing in the past, what I've been told the proper way was we would take 50% of the helmets this year, ship them off, and then 50% of the helmets next year. Helmet cost to refurbish is around $35 a helmet. There's about 1,000 helmets to do for all the schools. That's all 3 boards combined. So that's why they would split it up into 2 years. And I don't know how the budget worked, if it was each school or if it was a line item in your budgets or what. I'm not sure. But that's roughly the cost. So then it talked about the amount of practices that could happen prior to the start of the season. And it was said that it needed, after the certification, all teams would be required to hold 10 practices with full pads before the season could begin. So the rules for high school football in that document, the OFIA document, talks about 8 practices, and it talks about the skills that would be trained or taught during those practices. And a lot of the skills that it talks about aren't necessarily to do with tackling, and it doesn't specify that they will be full dress. So a lot of times when we practice in football, we hardly ever hit at full speed because you're going to cause injuries. And if you're going to do 10 practices at full speed, tackling drills, before you even start the season, chances are you're going to have half a team there to do the season. So you're better off to just work at it at half speed or even just touch and push. So you'll contact somebody, you'll say, hey, you're tackled, blah, blah, blah. But most of the times, you're never going to do it. If there is tackling skills, it's usually done on a one-on-one basis with soft barriers on both sides. You're head on, but you might do that 2 times in a season. Most of the tackling is done during game situations. Helmets and shorts are usually used, but the helmets are more or less there first to get the guy used to wearing a helmet for a full game. The other thing is just in case he bumps his head or you want to protect his teeth even though they're wearing mouth guards. The coaching staff. So there's different classifications for coaching. Is that it?
Yeah, that's 5 minutes, Mr. Faka. Thank you very much.
All right.
Any questions of clarification for Mr. Faka from trustees? Trustee Burgess and then Trustee Halberstadt.
Thank you, Mr. Faka. I wish you had maybe a bit more time or had something, but I think there are some things that are unsaid. I'm just wondering, with the Windsor-Essex County Health Unit's recent recommendation by the CEO that sports be delayed.
Yes.
Doesn't this render this rather moot at this point?
No, there's still, I think, I'm scared to use the word negligence, but there was somebody dropped the ball and the helmets weren't certified. I think that should be looked into as to why the helmets weren't certified. Because that's really what's going on. If there wouldn't have been this problem, then we would have been training right now and working out. But the helmets weren't certified, and I can't figure out why in 20 years of certifying helmets, all of a sudden this year they weren't. The health thing actually works in our favor because it gives us 4 weeks to get the helmet certified.
I have a completely other question, so I'll wait.
I'll put you on the queue. Trustee Halberstadt and then Trustee Cook.
Yeah, I'd like to address, Mr. Faka, the issue of how long it would take to get the helmets certified. Could you explain a little bit, and I have been researching this myself, how it works, where it would go. You talk about 880 helmets, right? Or 8,000, I mean. And so it would, they're shipped to Ohio, I believe.
Yes. So there's a company from Toronto that comes down, picks up the helmets. Rydell in Ohio is one of the only helmet reconditioning places, and they recondition for Schutt, for Wilson, for Rydell, for Zenith, everybody. And the company that was used before was from Toronto. They would come down in a truck, package everything up, bring it over to the States. When they get to the States, what they do is they totally buff the helmet down. They take all the paint off if they were painted. They change all the rivets, all the hardware, all the padding on the inside if it's required. All new stainless hardware gets put in. They repaint the helmet and they put their certification sticker on it. And then it gets shipped back to all the schools.
Okay, supplementary, how long do you think this would take to, if you went ahead?
So when I originally dropped the letter off, we had inquired and we talked to the vice president of Rydell in the U.S. and he had said that he would give us 4-week turnaround, but that was almost a week and a half ago. So we haven't been able to contact him directly like we did before. So I'm anticipating it's either less or it's more because the helmets are through the queue or a whole bunch more came in. But we were trying to find that information prior to that meeting, this meeting, but I couldn't.
Thank you. Trustee Cook.
Thank you. So I just want to say that, yes, it doesn't make this a moot point at all because football season can still happen in October.
Trustee Cook, these are questions of
I do have a
clarification.
question. Thank you. So how long does it take to get the coaches certified?
Well, that was the other issue that I was trying to get to here was that there's 3 methods of certification. There's the national coaching, then there's a Canadian coaching, and then there's also in those 2 line items in the OFIA book, it talks about 3 to 5 years experience. So what it does is it tells you either this, or this, and the 3 to 5 years is on the bottom of each one of those requirements. Most coaches in this area do have 3 to 5 years experience, and it asks for 1 head coach to have the other documentation. And that was the OFIA handbook out of 2021, I believe. So most coaches are already set in this area.
Yeah. So my supplemental is if you have the coaches ready and the helmets ready, you can make a season in October if it's approved, or could there be a season in spring?
Yeah, ideally October, a shortened season though. Maybe we'd knock a couple of games off. A couple of years ago, we played into the first week of December. So that's not uncommon. You know, it is Canada, it is fall, so I mean, it's cold. But the kids are used to playing in the cold anyways. But it could be a shortened season. And then the OFSA, if it does happen, is still available. If we play it in the spring, then there is no OFSA. It's more of just, let's just play football.
Thank you. Trustee Sartori.
Thank you. Can you clarify for me what the typical football season is? So you've mentioned training that could be occurring right now, I think you said, and then you also mentioned October. So would that be when the actual games start? I'm not totally familiar with how the football season works.
Yeah, so as far as I know, and that's just based on being a dad, is August, the first week before school starts, they're allowed to start training the students. So if you're in grade 10, 11, you usually get put in a week early before school starts. And then you do your 4 weeks of training, 3 weeks, and then you'd start your season by September, the end of September. And so, yeah, beginning of October, end of September.
And then when would it typically end?
2 years ago, we had playoffs at Holy Names. I want to say it was either the last week of November or the first week of December. It was cold.
And then a supplemental? Yeah, thank you. And so does the training, the
Yes.
4 weeks of training that you mentioned, does that also involve like safety training, not sort of just different types of plays?
Yeah, it goes hand in hand, right? So you'll have to take some players off to the side. You'll work with them if they're linemen or if they're receivers or backs. It's all broken up into different teams, and then you'll have some mock scrimmages. But usually a lot of the practicing is done without full equipment on. Like I said before, it's just a helmet, and that's more to protect the head from bumps and things. It's not like you're really tackling. When they do tackle drills, they'll set up tackling dummies, like they'll have the stand-up dummies, they'll hit that at full speed, or they'll have barriers on each side. There'll be one guy here, and he'll try to get around them. But you don't really want to start tackling your own people because you could cause injury. And especially with backs and quarterbacks and those positions, your receivers, you know, they're frail. So.
Thank you. I did have a second separate question when it's time.
So I've got Trustee Hatfield with her first question.
Hi, Dino.
Hi.
I wanted to know if you're one of the certified coaches or?
No, I'm
you
not. I'm just a dad.
Okay, so, because I wanted to ask a question, but I didn't know what capacity I was addressing it, so can I just ask my question now? So, during the practice sessions, are there going to be helmets available? Since we have an obligation to protect the safety of the students.
Right. So this is what I envisioned, was that we would do a lot of cardio intensive workouts for the 4 weeks while we're waiting for the helmets to come back.
But if you're not one of the coaches, how can you guarantee us that that's what would happen during the training program?
I've talked to most of the coaches that I know, and so I've talked to the Herman coaches, Brennan coaches, you know, and that's what they've told me. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone on the phone with their first question before I move to second questions? Second questions, we've got Trustee Burgess and then Trustee Sartori.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I honestly almost don't know how to word it, but I'm trying to pick back to what you were saying about what is an average year, what a normal year would be for football season, what our expectations would be. And I thank my colleagues for the questions previously, but in your experience, at what point in a season do teams usually ensure that they have certified equipment? It seems to me that you're saying it's anomalous this year. It's different from maybe even last year. You know, you had an expectation that something was going to be done and it wasn't done.
Correct.
But well, what would a regular year be? When would you have to normally do that? Would schools initiate that equipment certification? At what point in, I don't know, May or June or something? Do you have to know who's going to be ready for August?
Yeah,
And I put a fine point on it. You talked about other boards and other teams. Obviously, this is extracurricular, and it's across boards. So even if one board felt differently than the other two, what kind of a season is that? So what are your expectations and how is it different from previous years? What could have been done earlier?
Well, the helmets could have been certified. I was told that the process started last January, okay, for the certification of the helmets. So originally it was handled by one individual and one company. This individual would go around to all the schools, talk to all the coaches, gather up all the helmets, ship them away. That changed. I don't know why, but it changed. Then it was handed to somebody else. When we talked to the certifying agency, they said they had been contacted in January. And it dragged on until June. And then they lost contact with whoever was doing it. That's all I know. But normally it's stamped on the side, 20, 19, 21, and it's 2 years from that date. So if they were stamped 20, they're good for 21, basically, the season of 21.
I just want to make sure I'm really clear because I still don't know the logistics of collecting helmets. Is it by school board or is it a WEXA thing? Is it like helmets from all schools go and they get brought
Correct.
back and distributed to across 3 boards?
Correct. So
There's somebody from
school has-
WEXA who is coordinating?
no.
No?
That part I really don't know about. All I know is that it was handled by one person. This person would take care of collecting all the helmets
From all 3 boards?
from all 3 boards.
Participants?
Yeah. And then they would be sent away, certified, and returned.
Thank you, Trustee Sartori.
Thank you. So I just had a couple of questions based on just thinking about potential alternatives, if it is possible at some point, based on direction from the health unit, that football can occur. So are you aware of, and I'll just step back for one moment as well. I don't yet know whether the helmets have been sent. I'm not sure if you know that or if that's a question for
They have not been
for
sent.
admin. Okay. So are you aware of, are there alternative avenues, like to rent helmets, for example, or they have to be these specific helmets?
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking about shortening that timeline potentially, if there are different ways to go about getting certified helmets.
I think if it wasn't a COVID year, that you could almost share helmets, but you can't because of the COVID stuff going on. But there's no real other way to do it than send them away and get them certified.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Unless you want to buy all new at $375 a piece.
Thank you. Okay, so we do have last questions from Trustee Halberstadt and Trustee Cook, and then we will allow Mr. Faka to exit.
Yeah, Mr. Faka, I think you talked about the cost of the helmets, and there's, I think you had said that it's about $35,000 to have them reconditioned and inspected. So that would be for all 800, how many helmets?
880 to 1,000 helmets would be roughly that price, yeah.
$35,000.
Yeah. And that's, some will be 20, some will be 40. So that's kind of the average is $35 a helmet.
Just a supplementary, you talked about the guys having this helmets in January, which would have got plenty of time to get here in time for football season.
Right.
But I guess there was an assumption that football would not be included in by the province in being allowed to participate. And then, in fact, they did, and that was August the 3rd. And at that point, according to the document you gave me, and I hope everybody will get one, but August the 3rd was when we heard, all the boards heard about football being allowed. It happened after that. It was basically determined, the way I understand it, that we couldn't get there in time.
Trustee Halberstadt, do you have a question?
Yeah, well, was my question. Would you say that's correct from your information?
Yep, August 3rd is when the province said all contact sports are a go. And then August 20th, I believe, is when I saw the letter that was issued to all the coaches and principals and everybody else.
Thank you. Trustee Cook, go ahead.
Thank you. So what if football was approved for October, would you consider a house league if that was the only option, to like a house league just with Greater Essex Public Board? Would that be of any benefit? And I'm thinking about some of these kids that need to be seen by scouts that are looking for scholarships and had dreams that have diminished because somebody dropped the ball.
Yeah, they'll look really good if we do house league. The all-stars will look like all-stars, that's for sure. But you know, there's a lot of kids at the other boards too that are good kids. You know, I can think of 3 or 4 right now at Holy Names or, you know, Cardinal Carter. There's some really good football players out there.
No, then we're done. So just out of curiosity, who is the person who takes care of the helmets? Is that from this board or another board?
Well, he no longer does that. There was something to do with paperwork, and they didn't renew his business plan that was originally set up. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you to, no. That will have to be a question for administration, unfortunately. Thank you, Mr. Faka, for joining us this evening, and you can exit the room for us now. We really appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
All right, I appreciate the time.
Thank
you
you
very much.
So moving forward through our agenda, we are at...
I'd like to put a motion forward with consent.
No, there is no time for motions right now. We are going through reports to be received. Motions are not in order at this point.
When can I make a motion? I don't
During
just-
reports. So we're moving through to our E1, our return to school update. I believe that will be Director Kelly. I'll be giving a brief update. We do have our report in our package as well.
Yeah, thank you very much through you, Madam Chair. I'm pleased to draw your attention to the board's return to school plan, which you were provided with. As we've experienced over the last few years, it seems the return to school is once again complicated and ever-changing, and I would really like to acknowledge all the work done by staff to prepare this plan and also to ensure that our buildings are safe and that they're ready for our students, and we are anxious to welcome students back. Our facilities and custodial staff have worked diligently to ensure that we are prepared to welcome people back as safely as possible. And I'd like to thank the Windsor-Essex County Health Unit for their ongoing and very responsive rapport that we have with them. As you'll note, we've worked in the report, it's noted that we've worked with our unions, our coterminous boards, our administration, our health and safety committees as our key partners in developing our plan. And thank you to Superintendent Allwender, and I know Superintendent Armstrong have had a lot to do with the development of this. On August 3rd, we received the Ministry of Education's COVID Health and Safety Operational Guidance for this year. That is ongoing, I might add. There's still changes that came today. Our guide reflects what we had currently, and updates, as I said, will be necessary as we get more direction. And for example, you would see the press release today from the health unit speaking very specifically to a number of things. And so I think I sent that to trustees, but there are very specific recommendations in that we will be following. So information on the cover page, I think, is provided. I know that everyone's always concerned about the budget and how that is affected. And so Superintendent Armstrong has provided in that cover page some information about how this affects our budget. The guide also reflects, I think, the guiding principles by which this was made, as you notice on page 6 of the report. Those are the considerations in terms of how this plan was developed. I know people always have questions about the learning models. I know information was sent and has been posted to both families and trustees with respect to the learning models that were developed. And so information is enclosed in there as to how the learning models will work. This year we're offering both virtual and in-person learning for both our elementary and secondary school students. And the description of timetables and such is on that. Now, I thought if Superintendent Mills, if you or Superintendent Houston had any idea of numbers, because I know that I did update trustees on the numbers in both virtual and in person, but I thought it might be helpful if you could share that with trustees now, because I think it's flexed a little bit.
Sure, that's not a problem at all. Our total enrollment at this current moment is 36,346 students. In our elementary panel, our students that are attending in person is 23,431 students. Our virtual school is at 1,231 students for a total of 24,662 elementary pupils at this time. In secondary, we have 11,041 students attending in person. We have 643 attending virtually, and we have 11,684 secondary students in total at this time.
Thank you for that update, Superintendent Mills. Again, those numbers are a little bit fluid as people register and additions to things, but those are our numbers, so thank you for that. The remainder of the document, I think, is self-explanatory. It's quite similar to what it was last year. You will see that it speaks to things like dealing with students with special needs, our before and after school programs, extracurricular, which you've seen today has been paused for till October. You will also see some information here on subject delivery. The outbreak plan, I believe, will be added to this. Is that correct, Superintendent Allwender? Because that is still being developed. There's more information on technology distribution, and there's a number of component parts of this. But I just wanted to give a recent update from the ministries. There's change now to the to the documents, but the K-12 masking would be mandatory as agreed with the recommendation of our local health unit, and certainly all boards in our area will be doing that. So there's a lot of information contained in there. I know that you can read, but I just wanted to provide an overview of what is provided in that document, and I'd be happy to answer any questions, and would members of the senior team. There are also things on infrastructure, ventilation included within there, and we could provide more detail in any of the areas. I think at this time, remember that there may be changes to this document as we work through and get up-to-date information from both the health unit and the Ministry of Education. So we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. So looking for questions from trustees. I do have Trustee Sartori and Trustee Hatfield. Go ahead, Trustee Sartori.
Thank you. So first of all, I really like the addition of the 3 strategic priorities at the top of the report, as well as the guiding principles. I thought it really positioned the thinking behind the report really well, so thank you for that. I had a question about students specifically with medical needs. I did see that you've covered off students with special education requirements, but one of the things that I have been noticing and hearing across the province, not necessarily locally, but I'm not sure, so that's part of my question, is the lack of availability of nurses or PSWs to be able to go into the classrooms to support kids with medical needs, such as, if they require certain feeding and things like that. So I'm wondering what the situation is locally, and if somebody could answer that question. And then the second part of it being if it is keeping some kids with medical needs out of the classroom.
Thank you for the question, and I'm going to look to Superintendent Wilcox, because I think he has a handle on that.
Trustee Sartori, that's a great question. I have been in contact with Home and Community Care Support Services, which is the new LHIN name. I have been talking to the nursing coordinator there. At this time, there isn't really an issue with nursing shortages in our area, so we're very lucky because I do know colleagues that are experiencing those in other regions. So right now, all students that have medical complexities that receive services from nurses will be attending school.
Oh, that's just fabulous. Thank you. No further questions.
We love when there's great news like that. Thank you very much. Trustee Hatfield, go ahead.
Thank you. I do have a few questions, so can you keep me on the list for when you're going around? Okay, so my first one is, I wondered what our learning teaching model is going to be when students need to be quarantined. Because I anticipate that that's going to happen quickly, that we're going to have to prepare for that.
Thank you. It's a good question. I think Superintendent Mills and I had a conversation about this. You're saying for students, for example, who aren't vaccinated perhaps, and the classroom gets home, it would go to virtual learning if the whole class was dismissed. But if there are differences in the class, Superintendent Mills, I don't want to be wrong here, but I think you and I had a discussion about this. Oh, thank you. No, it isn't. Okay.
Yeah, we did talk about this, and there would be differences, especially in our grade 7 and 8 classes, when there's vaccinated and unvaccinated students. We did talk about work being sent home, work packages being sent home in some cases. When the whole class is dismissed, we have talked about virtual learning, but that's something that certainly we can discuss further.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think do we confuse you, Trustee Hatfield?
No, I'm concerned that we don't have a plan, because I expect that it's going to happen quickly, that there's going to be cases pop up once the kids get back to school. I mean, that's the prediction from the health authorities, the medical authorities. So I am concerned. Like, I know with my own grandkids, 2 of them are in daycare, and a couple weeks the cohort got sent home for the quarantine period because one in the group tested positive. So thinking, okay, well, what's going to happen in our schools? Because I think it's going to happen quickly. It's not going to happen 6 months down the road. It could be 6 days. And I know that in the last few months of our school year, the previous school year, it was like every day 2 or 3 groups were being sent home. Even when the schools closed, it was still coming up that cohorts were being recommended to quarantine because someone tested positive. So, I mean, this is something that I think needs to be in our plan, and parents need to be aware that the kids aren't going to miss out on 2 weeks of school when they get sent home.
Yeah, this is part of the outbreak plan too. Superintendent Allwender, do you want to add to that? But there certainly will be communication around that. And again, will depend on vaccinated and unvaccinated, because it's my understanding there are different rules. Superintendent Allwender?
Yes. I don't know that we actually decided. That would probably be a decision more around the learning models. But I think some of the discussions we had were with the putting the work online so the kids can do it that way. There was discussion about the packages as well to send work home. But I don't think we've come to a decision yet.
Yeah, I know Superintendent Mills and I, but we will communicate the exact plan. But I do believe there's differences between vaccinated and unvaccinated and how that would be treated in the secondary panel. But is that not true, Ms. Superintendent Allwender? So I do believe there would need to be an articulated plan around that.
Yeah, that part is in it. The learning model part isn't necessarily. So I'll give you the example. If a grade 8 class gets sent home, there was a high risk of the high contact. If they're asymptomatic and have had their double vaccine shots, they're able to go back to the school the next day. So that's a difference this year than last year, the biggest difference.
So therein lies the difference, and how posting work was the thought we had at this point, but there's still discussion on that.
Thank you. So I do have Trustee Burgess, I believe, had a question next. I just wanted to clarify that this back to school plan that we have is kind of a living document. So things like the outbreak plan and the vaccinations and those sorts of things will definitely be developed. So I thank Trustee Hatfield for that question. I know it's one that our communities are definitely worrying about and thinking about, as we do have a mix of vaccinated and unvaccinated students in our schools currently. So certainly information about that will still be coming out in this living document that we have. Superintendent Allwender, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I do. Just even at 3:30 today, another change just came out. So the safety plan is going to have to be updated again. And then even this week, there was more information that came out in the outbreak protocol too. So that's being updated. It comes out fairly late and often, but it is a working document.
Thank you very much, and I can appreciate for families, part of the reason we wanted to call this meeting was that families, I'm sure, have all these questions too, sitting around their kitchen tables wondering some of the choices that they'll be faced with having to make decisions on the fly. And so I want to appreciate everybody's patience while we work on that, and know that this document will be living online, and we'll provide updates. And we wanted to make sure that we had the most up to date that we could tonight to be able to talk to all of our stakeholders before that first day of school. So I appreciate that there may be some information that's still being developed, and I'm hoping that that when that information is updated on the back to school plan, that you'll have a look on the website for that. Trustee Burgess, go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also have a couple of questions, so you might want to make another round. I appreciate the report. I too am a little concerned on behalf of parents and guardians who had to make a decision whether to put their students in person and or virtual at the end of July, beginning of August. Things have changed. And so there's a bit of remorse on some people's part, thinking that maybe they made the wrong decision because that outbreak plan, that other thing, isn't in place. They don't know how much disruption. None of us do. I understand it's a living document, but I just want to state that there is concern that not all of the ducks that we could have in a row maybe are in a row at the beginning of the school year, from our perspective, fielding calls. So I have a question I'm going to ask about tech. I noticed on page, let me see, I didn't have the page number, technological education starting on 13 going to 14. It says that the a tech education safety guidelines for COVID-19 is being developed. Much like when we heard from the presenter, there are courses that are so essential for kids to be enthused about going to school, and technological education is one of them. And I'm not talking about just computer technology, I'm talking about shops and things like that. And they've taken a hit, and a few things have taken a hit. We've known about this, so when is the guideline going to be developed? There isn't a timeline associated to this, and I'm sort of surprised that it's not ready to go.
Superintendent Houston, would you know the answer to that, or Superintendent Howitt? I think this is a ministry guideline, is it not? It's not a local guideline.
Yeah. We work.
That helps in the
work,
understanding of it.
Yeah, we work with the provincial associations, and so it's coming forthwith. I imagine we'll have something out next week.
I'll wait for question 2.
So I have, I did put you on the list for your second question. I have Trustee Cheen and then Trustee Olmsted as well. So Trustee Cheen, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is regarding the secondary school learning model. And on page 6, secondary remote learning model will be the Great Essex Virtual Secondary School. And the learning platform for secondary students in remote learning is Brightspace D2L. And I want to clarify, I'm not quite understanding. So do we still use the hybrid model, or we have changed?
Thanks for the question. Through you, Madam Chair. We are not using the hybrid model. We are using a true virtual school. And so the platform or the learning management system for that is Brightspace and or D2L. They're same thing.
Oh, supplemental. So how do we solve the problem about register, different courses? Is that still available? All the courses for the online learning available?
I believe that students have been timetabled at this point into their classes. I know that Superintendent Houston has spent hours on this. So yeah, they've already been timetabled into their classes for the next academic school year.
Oh, okay.
So they would have chosen whether they want to be in the virtual school and or whether they wanted to be in person.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Trustee Olmsted, go ahead on the phone.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Go right ahead.
All right. Thank you very much. I did speak with Director Kelly briefly last evening about the masks and PPE being distributed to our staff. I understand that they're the blue surgical masks that I see all of you wearing on the live stream. But in light of the aerosol transmission, the high contagion of Delta, is there a possibility of the staff, in particular those who are teaching under grade 6s who are not able to be vaccinated, is there a possibility of them being provided with N95 to protect our staff and also the students? Or if they have access to N95s, will they be able to wear them in the class?
Superintendent Armstrong and I have spoken about this, and I believe the answer is no, but I will let you give some more detail on the why of that, Superintendent Armstrong.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. The blue masks that are provided that we're all wearing today, they're surgical masks. And white. Sorry. They are surgical masks. They do protect the wearers from bodily fluids, microorganisms, particulate matter. It protects not only yourself as you are breathing in, but also whatever you're exhaling. So it protects the others that are around you. And these medical masks that we are wearing, they are ASTM, they meet ASTM International Standards, which is the American Society for Testing Materials. And they are a level 2 mask, surgical grade mask, so they're designed to protect against moderate arterial pressure splash. So they're fairly good. N95 respirators, the ministry only is providing those to boards. Remember, we procure our PPE through the Ministry of Consumer and Government Services. The Ministry of Education funds the MGCS, and they direct the MGCS in terms of what to procure on behalf of the boards. And they're basically the pandemic supply chain for the ministry. So the N95 respirators, the ministry is making them specifically available to those staff that perform aerosol generating medical procedures, or if a staff member is within 2 meters of someone performing the AGMP. So as a result, we had to actually submit information to the ministry to tell them how many staff were actually performing those procedures. And in our case at our board, it's 6 staff that potentially may have to do it. They do it actually rather infrequently, and they had to be fit tested for the N95 respirators. That is the only mechanism that's available for board staff. We cannot procure them otherwise through the MGCS for the rest of the staff. But the ministry again is directing us to provide the level 2 medical masks, and as I've explained, they are a strong source of PPE for the board.
Do you have a supplemental, Trustee Olmsted?
I do. If the health unit recommends that our staff wear N95s, can that be overridden, or is this purely a ministry directive? I'm just very concerned about this Delta variant. I've spent a tremendous amount of time in the hospital, as I told Director Kelly during this outbreak with my husband's health issues. And we spend a lot of time with doctors, and I'm hearing N95s are the way to protect yourself and others, particularly with the Delta variant. So I was just wondering that the mechanism, if the health unit, if Dr. Ahmed does recommend N95s at any point, could we go forward with that, or is this simply a ministry-guided decision?
Through you, Madam Chair, Superintendent Armstrong. The ministry, the Windsor-Essex County Health Unit has already reviewed our COVID safety plan, which does specify and articulate the PPE that's being issued to the board. They approved of our COVID safety plan, as did the Ministry of Labor. So right now, on the basis of what is in our safety plan, it is the level 2 grade medical masks that are outlined as being required for our staff to wear, with the exception of those 6 staff that are performing the AGMPs. in which case they've been fit tested for the N95s. If the health unit mandated, gave an order for the board to have our staff wear N95s, then certainly we would have to comply with the Windsor-Essex County Health Unit order. It would be over and above what the ministry requests, and we would have to look at procuring those N95s through an alternative source, and it would be a cost to the board, and all the staff would have to be fit tested. But right now, the health unit is quite comfortable with the medical grade masks that we are currently providing to staff, and we'll take their direction as they provide it.
Thank you very much. Do any other trustees have a first question before I move forward to second questions? Trustee Halberstadt, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, my question regards, there's a number of references to cleaning products in the report. And my question has to do with what kind of cleaning products are we using, given the motion, I think, back in May, to examine all of the possible alternatives to Virex. And I haven't really heard anything since. So I'm wondering, school's in tomorrow, are we cleaning everything with Virex, or are we got through the process of looking for alternatives?
Through you, Madam Chair. Again, the board has not made any changes over and above what we've already had the discussion about. So we did make changes, for example, in the classrooms. The products that are being used was Oxivir, which is a hydrogen peroxide-based product. As well, we're using Preempt. You'll see there's a canister right there on the table. It is a hydrogen peroxide wipe, safe that you don't need to wear gloves when you're using that PPE. It's very convenient for purposes of cleaning desks and chairs. So all of those hydrogen peroxide-based products, like I said, like Oxivir and the Preempt wipes, are being used in the classrooms during the day for cleaning the high-touch surfaces and for cleaning desks and so forth. There's still a requirement under the Safe Food Handling Act with respect to using appropriate products for purposes of food preparation and breakfast and nutrition programs, so that continues to be Virex at this time. The custodians still continue to use Virex after hours for cleaning where it's necessary. We continue to investigate the products that were raised at our board meeting back in May. We have consulted with the health unit, and we continue to do that consultation. And we are bringing forward our chemical management program that comes up for a request for proposal in the beginning of the year. And we will certainly, in conjunction with the results of investigating those products, will certainly include that as part of the RFP process.
Okay, just with regard to the list that was part of this motion from Workers' Health and Safety Center, have you gone through all of those possible alternatives? Or was there many?
Sorry, Alan, is this on the report?
Sorry. What?
That the alternative solutions are not a part of the report, so we just need questions on this report.
Well, there's mentions of the cleaning we're doing in the report.
Yeah, and I think that one's been answered. If there's any additional questions on what on the products in that previous report from May, I think if you just sent Superintendent Armstrong an email about those and communicated with those. It's just not in this report here, so we have to stick to what's in this actual report. So Trustee Cook, no, you don't have another, okay.
Yes, no answer.
Thank you. I did have a first question, and it's not specifically mentioned in here, so I hope it's not too off board, but ventilation. So I know we've had some, I've had some questions from my communities about ventilation and what's been happening. I know we have lots of projects on the go for ventilation. I'm wondering where we can find some information about those, families can find information about those. And we did hear from the ministry that there was additional HEPA filters and money that's come to us. So I'm wondering if we can get an update. We know COVID is airborne, and we know that that's a massive thought for parents on parents' minds. Certainly is for mine when I'm sending mine back to school, one unvaccinated. So definitely something I really want to know about. So if we can get an update on where we're at with ventilation, what do those HEPA filters look like from the ministry, and what money we have and where that's looking to go.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, I will certainly provide the initial update, but I do want to recognize that Juliana Hinchliff, our Manager of Facility Services, and Vince LaFramboise, who is our Building Systems Officer, is also on the line to take some of the more detailed questions that you might have. So high level, with respect to ventilation, the board has posted a school board ventilation profile that is on the front page of our website. This outlines the ventilation protocols, the school board-wide investments that we have made, and you can click on a drop-down menu and you can select a school, and you will be able to see information with respect to that school's ventilation in that specific site. This is required by the ministry, so I want to thank the facility services team because it was a lot of work to generate that information, but it is available now for our families and for our staff to take a look at. For sites that have full or partial mechanical ventilation, all the ventilation systems have already been inspected and they are in good working order. MERV 13 filters are being used. Our filter changes are occurring every 2 months on those systems. Our systems are operating longer, so they're going to run at least 2 hours before the start of school during occupancy, and then another 2 hours after the end of school. And of course, we're maximizing the amount of as much outdoor air as we can while trying to ensure occupancy comfort. For schools that do not have forced air systems, the board has placed standalone HEPA filter units in all classrooms, libraries, portables, staff rooms, and office spaces. We've also placed them in gyms, lunchrooms, childcare spaces, and administrative spaces as well. Regardless of the type of ventilation system that is in a school, all FDK areas will have at least one HEPA unit, if not two, in those spaces. The ministry did announce recently some information or some funding with respect to the HEPA units. They allocated 20,000 units across the province. Our board received 491 units. We actually took delivery of them this week, so it was quite a shipment. And that's in addition to the 390 that were already in our system. So we have over 800 units that have been or will be deployed in schools before Tuesday. And again, of course, as we know, we've made some very significant investments in our mechanical ventilation systems. We've done this through the CVRIS, that's the Resiliency Infrastructure Funding. If you recall, we received $15.6 million of funding through that stream, and $11.4 million of that was for ventilation. And it's to either upgrade systems where it was aging and it was coming to the end of its useful life, or it's installing mechanical ventilation systems in schools where it did not have it. As well, we have the Federal Safe Return to School Fund, which we've received some funding for, and we've been using that to purchase the MERV 13 filters and to put the HEPA units and to do ventilation, for example, in the gym at Massey is one example of that. That's what I have. If you have more specific questions, or if Julie or Vince on the line have something further to add, I would certainly welcome that.
I want to give a minute just in case we have anybody who's chimed in on the phone.
No, Shelley did a great job of summarizing what we've done. Thank you, Juliana.
Wonderful to hear your voice anyway, Juliana. Thank you very much. Thank you to that team. So I don't have any supplemental. I know that will be ongoing as well. And I thank you and your team very much for that work. I know that that's something that, that parents are definitely concerned about. So I thank you very much for that. Moving on to second questions, I've got Trustee Hatfield and then Trustee Burgess for second questions. Go ahead, Trustee Hatfield.
Thank you. First, to everyone in administration, I should have said up front, thank you for the report. I know it's a lot of work. I know it's a fluid document. I know that changes are going to be taking place as the year progresses. I did have a question about ventilation, but it actually got answered Superintendent Armstrong, so thank you for the answer. But I wanted to go back. Trustee Burgess actually started to make comments, but didn't actually ask a question on something that I was concerned about, and that is that parents now are starting to raise concerns with trustees about the decisions that they made a month ago about whether or not to send their children back to the classroom. And a month ago, we hadn't clearly established this fourth wave and the rising numbers of the more contagious variants, and we know that the hospital has just set up a pediatric unit to deal with children that they're expecting to show up at their door, which is scary. I guess my question is, how do we respond to these parents that they're not able to change their decision? Because I think circumstances have changed, and it's just as fluid as everything else that we're dealing with. And I don't know how to reassure the parents that are contacting me to say that they're freaking out. They're freaking out. They're regretting their decision to send their child back to school, and I really don't know what the answer is. I mean, I understand everything about staffing and all of that, but that's not what parents want to hear.
Thank you for the question through you, Madam Chair. It's certainly something that we have questions about. We did leave our staffing substantially later than other boards did and did try to make sure that people had a late choice in this experience. And I know it's just difficult, and parents do have a choice in the January for a change, which is, again, something trustees had advocated for. There have been medical exceptions. There have been people who, because we're doing JK masking, are much happier too. So they've actually now feel more secure. So we've had kind of all sides of it. But the class changes are really difficult, and we are directed to keep within class size. So, I don't know, Superintendent Mills, I know your office gets the most calls, so maybe you have a better response. But we are really trying our best, and reorganization is going to be a bit later, and so you might talk about how that factors in a bit. I don't know.
No, I think you covered most of the points that we did wait until the latest possible minute. We do have parents that are calling right now. We've been working with families, and as the director has said, if there's extenuating circumstances, we've worked and have accommodated some. It's very difficult, though, at this time, obviously, and I know you said about the staffing, but we waited as long as we could and allowed us to be ready for school to be ready for September 7th. And that's one of the difficulties that we face making the changes at this particular moment in time.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, I can appreciate that, absolutely. And I know, I'm sure we're all getting calls like that and feeling it from community members as we're kind of encountering them. And I understand from a parent perspective, it's very, very difficult. And we will, I'm confident as a parent that I'm sending my kids back to the safest environment. It still gives me heart palpitations, as everything does, sending my children out into this. So
If I might add, that's why some of the restrictions, I think, came out from the health unit in terms of, keeping school in-person learning safe. And so I think those, added restrictions and measures of having masks at JKSK are just other ways that people are working to protect.
A very good point. And thank you to our health unit partners, particularly Dr. Ahmed. Congratulations to him. Thank you to our health unit partners who are side by side with us in this. And parents can feel secure in that we're taking advice from our public health unit and trusting it. So thank you very much for that. Trustee Burgess, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I have a bit of an odd question, but lately, of course, high schools students have been informed whether or not they got all their options, etc. And I thank administration for getting back to me about a particular concern about French immersion. I have concerns about French immersion, and I don't expect all the answers right now, but I just want to flag it. Unlike last year, where we thought we could go through in person, and it ended up, with a lot of lockdown, etc. The experience for parents and guardians who had their children enrolled in French immersion was really difficult, if I would say compounded in a way. If the parents and guardians couldn't support their learners as virtual learners, remote learners, emergency learners, if they didn't have French as a mother or secondary tongue. In-person learning with a second language when you have half your face masked is a disadvantage to learning. We expect to see how we mouth words, what our expressions are. It's just, fundamental. Of course, you don't have to see in order to learn different languages, but it helps tremendously. So knowing that virtual learners at Kingsville High School, for example, aren't going to be getting their options because they can't be accommodated, and they now have to take core French instead of an immersion program because it's just a game of numbers.
Sorry, Trustee Burgess, do you have a question?
Yeah, my question is about this. I have to give the preface because it's about the whole program. How are we going to ensure that programs of choice like French immersion are not going to be sabotaged in their enrollment because the experience in elementary school and leading up to extended or French immersion in high school has been somewhat cobbled by this experience. I've heard from quite a few parents who were going to enroll their kids in kindergarten French immersion and aren't now. And those who were in French immersion who just said it's just too hard. They don't have the support at home. So I appreciate getting the enrollment numbers. I don't know how many of these are in that program, but I want to put it on the radar and flag it because I think that even with this year, knowing it's fluid, we don't know what's going to happen, etc., it's not the same kind of learning.
So is the question about accommodating those
so
learners?
How are we going to really help parents and guardians with their learners who they have to support virtually or otherwise? And how are we going to make an extra effort to make sure that our enrollment in those programs going forward, and I mean over the next few years, are going to be robust? I hope to put a shovel in the ground at a dual-track high school, and I don't want the program destroyed by the time the thing is built.
Trustee Burgess, I want to direct a question to administration.
So what are our plans in order to keep French immersion, particularly language acquisition, as robust as possible to support our parents and learners?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I know that Superintendent Howitt probably can help me with this question, but I do believe that the French immersion programming has suffered for certain, and we've had students move to English programming as a result of not feeling supported or not feeling they're able to accommodate and families. So I look to my colleagues at the back. I don't know the numbers, certainly in the French immersion, but there certainly has been a decline, and what we might be doing to support that.
So I'll start off. We did have a fair number of families who, during the pandemic, opted to return to English program. One of the things that we did do is we suspended our policy in terms of children being accepted into the program for this year, because typically there would be an assessment of the student. So we didn't want that to impede them re-entering into the immersion program. Messaging has gone out to immersion schools and our staff in immersion schools around keeping in mind that some students have been away from the French program, and in terms of their support of the children and patients as the children re-enter. And then another component, which I think is a really exciting component in terms of a focus this year, and aligns to reading overall for all students, is the science of reading and the support in that area. And there is an investment as well for French teachers. In fact, we're awaiting an announcement of some funding to help us specifically in the area of French language and reading with our students. So it aligns perfectly with our Science of Reading plan, which is an aggressive plan to help all students with reading, but is taking particular consideration as well for our immersion students. That's what we have right now.
And if I could, for parents who didn't want to take their kids out, but, have, and/or who were going to struggle, still because they don't have the language, they can't support their kids, particularly if they're learning virtually. What can we do to help our parents and guardians?
So one thing we did last year that I think went over famously well was we would previously offer what was called a Curiosity Club as an additional support to students. When the pandemic arrived, we offered a virtual homework connection for our families, which was an innovation, if you will, that developed because of the pandemic. So we did have French support. So we hired 10 French-speaking individuals and English. So there was support for families if they wanted, outside of the school day, to support their child in homework and lessons and so on. And we will continue with that this year.
Thank you very much. Any other trustees with a second question? I do have a second question. Trustee Halberstadt, I'll let you go ahead and then I'll finish up and then we'll move forward. Go ahead, Trustee Halberstadt.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'm going to go back to the football thing on page 10. The board has chosen to pause football based on direction from the Windsor-Essex County Secondary School Association, Athletic Association. So who is the board? Is the board the WEXA or is the board us? Because this decision didn't come to us. We read about it in the newspaper. So maybe going forward, since we have another pause by the health unit, who's going to make the decision, and will it come to, is there a plan to come to the board with this decision before we impose it and say that it's a board decision? Because to me it isn't. It's a committee of the board, or what you might call it, but it's not the board, it's WEXA.
The governing body of the sport is WEXA, is that correct? So that is, as I see, who, in combination with the boards making that decision?
Yeah, but so the trustees aren't involved in that?
It's an operational decision, so no, trustees aren't involved.
And who decides if that's an operational decision? You?
No, we don't direct staff.
Who does?
Our director, our employee does.
Okay, so second question to, I guess, Mr. Allender. We heard all the stuff about the helmets, why they were delayed, supposedly, according to Gino there, January, August the 3rd. You just take us through the process was in the timeline that we weren't able to meet, meet the start of a new school year. 13 other school boards are having football. Just wondering, how did it happen? There's a lot of talk around there and not that many answers.
Okay, I had a little bit of trouble hearing you there, but I'll try to do my best. So it started out, we have a board. So WEXA is the governing body. Okay, we also have senior administration from each of the boards involved too, to make sometimes some difficult decisions. Typically, if there is a difficult decision that we have to make, we'll bring it back to our own senior teams and just to discuss, to let the people know if it's a big decision, and so that they're not caught off guard. As far as the helmet, I'm going to go to the helmets. So the helmet research is about 6 weeks long. Now, Andrea Longmire Lewis was our our phys ed consultant, and she was the contact for us for a number of years. Not her choice to not research helmets. She was just the contact for us. She was also the contact.
Is this a teacher, Todd, a principal?
Pardon?
She's a principal?
No.
What is she?
She's
teacher?
Personnel, yeah. Okay, and again, has nothing to do with the research or anything like that. So we decided, because we felt that football was definitely not a go. The schools, there is a cost to the recertification of the helmets. And when you're not playing football, but they have to be done every other year, it's putting money into something that's, potentially nothing. So there's a concern there. As far as the time frame, I mentioned it was 6 weeks, is what the gentleman told us in the summertime. And it's not $30, but it's $70 to $80 per helmet. So it's a little bit more than what he suggested. As far as the training goes, the person that used to train our coaches has been laid off. There are still trainers across the province. The training is done electronically now, so that's not a problem. We can certainly get one based on availability. And now, as they're trained electronically, the physical component that the trainers have to go through on the field during the practice, they're now waiving that, so that, because, there's not a lot of options if there's not football going on. And so typically, what we do is we would place the order, or I guess that's the way you would put it. The gentleman would come in from Toronto, put him in a truck, take him back, do all the research, and it usually started at around, I'm going to say at around June is when they would come to do it. And so those are kind of the timelines.
Okay, so what about, with what's happened now, what about spring football? I know it was mentioned in your report, or in your press release. Why not flip-flop soccer and football? Soccer played in the fall and football in the spring, so they wouldn't ruin the fields. I understand the soccer season obviously was always in the fall, and it was changed. So I'm just wondering if we wanted to really try to get a solution for this, so we try some maybe innovative things, or go back to the old way.
And so the spring was mentioned, and basically the answer from, after consulting a number of people, it was in the spring they have soccer, they have baseball, they have track, and then there's your phys ed, the physical activity that will take place out in the fields. And so one thing is that people felt that the fields would be torn up. Another is that there's all those competing sports against each other, so even though there are a lot, it just adds another one to the menu there. So now you're going to have four sports that are going on at the same time. That was a concern that was shared. And coaching availability, because some coaches coach more than just the one sport, that was a concern. There's not offset at that time, and I'd say that's probably about, those were some of the factors that went into not saying that it's probably not worthwhile doing in the spring.
Thank you very much, Trustee. I have Trustee Olmsted and then Trustee Cook. Go ahead, Trustee Olmsted on the phone.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I was really happy to see on page 22 that there is a plan in place for the well-being of our students as they adjust to in-person learning. But I was wondering about those students who are not struggling with their well-being, but they're struggling with the skills that they might not have retained last year. There was a lot of pivoting between in-person and virtual, and not all children can adjust. And I know our staff did a stellar job. I had remote learners here. It was actually amazing to see how much effort was put into the virtual learning. But not all kids can retain, and not all kids can learn online. So I was just wondering if there's any support, like extra support in place, or additional learning supports that will go into the first couple weeks of school, just to kind of identify those kids who might have fallen behind in their reading, especially our young learners, our grade 1s and 2s. So our readers, our early math, just to kind of get them up to par, because I know it's a real struggle, and I did receive a lot of emails from parents worried about this upcoming school year if their child is going to be, at a grade 2 level. So I was just wondering if there's a plan in place for like additional support for both the parents and the students as they kind of struggle both to get back to in-person, but also to regain those skills that maybe got a little bit rusty last year with all of the pivoting.
Through you, Madam Chair, I can begin the conversation, and I know that others would be able to speak to it. Our focus will be welcoming back students through a mental health lens at the beginning, because we want to assure students that they can be successful and that they're welcome in our schools, and that their anxiety in return to school is perhaps not, it's normal, and that we want to support them in that way. And I know that Superintendent Korbach has talked about that. There would be programming for the first 10 days of school. There would be particular lessons on that, because it's really important that our students feel comfortable. With respect to the actual academic pieces, I don't know if Superintendent, you want to speak to something more specific on that, or Superintendent Wilcox. I see you looking at each other, so maybe you have something else to add.
Thank you, Madam Director. And we're looking at each other because we're working very closely together on this initiative around the science of reading. Superintendent Korbach has sent out an abundance of information, because the focus based on the Canadian Mental Health Organization is around the first 10 days of school and making students feel safe and comfortable. That is the focus. That is the message that has clearly gone out to the system and was part of the PD today, including a Brightspace module on reaching every learner with information on early reading intervention and early math intervention. But that is a clear focus across the system. In terms of the science of reading, a committee has been working earnestly, a collaboration between special education and program since the winter. We offered professional development in the summer for our teachers, and there's an intensive program for every primary teacher, as well as kindergarten teams in January, but all elementary primary teachers starting in October. That is the work, including reading kits that have been put together to support teachers in providing intervention and support for our young learners in the area of reading, because it is an equity issue. Everybody has the fundamental right to learn to read, and that is our moral and ethical responsibility, and that is where our focus is this year. And Mike, you want to talk about Lexia?
Sure, and of course, we'll continue our usage of Lexia, and I know we've presented on Lexia before. It's a reading intervention program, heavily research-based, heavily aligned to the science of reading. Those licenses will be allotted to each individual elementary school to help students who are struggling readers. So that, of course, is going to be offered to students as well to help support students who are struggling with reading.
Thank you very much. Supplemental, Trustee Olmsted?
No, my supplemental was about Lexia and Empower. So thank you so much, Superintendent Wilcox, for touching on that. Thank you.
I love it when we're all on the same page. Trustee Cook, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I have a question going back to the favorite sport tonight, football. So I heard you say that it's not a problem to certify the coaches because it's online. That won't take any time. So how about sending those helmets out? We have plenty of time. Before you had told me that it was 4 to 6 weeks, and we have a place in Ontario that could do that. So if we sent the helmets out by the latest September 17th, even if it's just for our board, to get some sort of a season in for these guys, the coaching could, or the certification for coaches could be done at by September 30th. And if approved by our health unit that they can play football in October, we could get a season in. Would you agree to that?
Well, I'm going to answer it a little bit different. So it is doable, as I mentioned. There's no question about that. My recommendation would still be not to have football, I mean, especially based on what we have. And our other boards, the coterminous boards, have agreed to not doing football either. And so I guess we're kind of going against the group decision that was made, a little while ago.
Supplemental?
Yeah, hopefully. You can tell me if I don't. And I will respectfully disagree with you. I've talked to many of those kids that play football, and it's sad. We have kids out there that were supposed to be scouted, that were up for scholarships. And what you're saying to them right now is, no, you're not. And I think that's a shame. We have an opportunity here, even if it's just our board,
Trustee Cook,
I have a question.
Thank
I
you.
have a question. We have an opportunity, even with our board, to have a season for these guys so they can be scouted, whether it's in person or by video. That part doesn't matter because that has been done with other sports through video. So I'm asking you again, can't we agree to have a season for our kids so they can go ahead with their future? These kids have been working out even through COVID to do this. Grade 11, some of these kids missed it last year in grade 12. And I just think it's wrong to do it again to them. So don't you think that we can work this out with them?
Are you referring to working it out with the coterminous boards?
No, with our board, to work it out, get the coaches certified, get the helmet certified, and give our kids an opportunity to have somewhat of a season, and to have the opportunity to be scouted and get scholarships.
As I said before, anything is doable. If you're asking my opinion, I'm going to go with the collective group that made it at first, and I don't think it's a good idea.
Thank you very much. I did have a second question to kind of wrap up this, and then we'll move on to E2. My question is, so on page 16, we reference visitors. Now, where did I go? Page 16 of the report, page 18 of our package here. We reference visitors required to self-screen and wear a medical grade mask on school premises. I'm wondering, the answer to this might be obvious to some, but certainly isn't obvious to me and to some people that I've heard from. Are volunteers the same as visitors? So we do have some volunteers that are coming into the school to run things like robotics and things like our lunch programs and some of our snack programs and those sorts of things. I'm wondering what the status is on allowing them in and what some of the parameters will be around volunteers specifically. Maybe not me coming to drop off lunch to my kid, but volunteers who are coming in on a regular or semi-regular basis. What's the direction for them?
Thank you for the question. Through you, Madam Chair. What we're doing right now is we're limiting as much as possible the individuals coming into the buildings. So if we're talking about food programs, that's a little bit different. Snack programs, if there's volunteers that run those are considered probably more the essential piece. But as far as visitors coming in, unless it is a necessary visit that has to happen, we're trying to keep them out of the building as much as possible.
Your question is, do they have to wear the mask and do they have to follow the protocols? I would say yes, they do.
So is it safe to say that if say a robotics program could run outside or something like that, that would be okay for a volunteer to come in and do that? I see Superintendent Austin has her hand up. I'm just wondering, I want to get some clarity there on what, if principals are asked, what they may be able to advise for their volunteers that are coming in for some of those things.
So just in addition to all of the other requirements, a regular volunteer within our schools is required to have the vaccination disclosure put in place prior to them being able to enter into our schools.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you, trustees. So we will move forward through our agenda. We are
for
on
information, if I could, or just even order. My understanding is we're limited to 2 questions in trustee question period, but not in a presentation for questions of clarification and information.
We aren't limited in that kind of way. If there are further questions, we can. Okay, go ahead, Trustee Burgess.
I have a couple quick questions. One, I noticed in the library, under libraries, there was no mention of extra ventilation, et cetera. And seeing as it has like an itinerant kind of flow to the Learning Commons or a library, I wondered if Ms. Hinchliffe is still on the line, whether we have additional HEPA filters, et cetera, in our Learning Commons or libraries, because it's not mentioned.
Thank you for the question. I'll jump in if that's okay. To you, Madam Chair. Libraries in our systems have been assessed just like all other learning spaces in our schools. And libraries which have full ventilation are operating as Superintendent Armstrong described earlier. Libraries that do not have full ventilation are having HEPA units installed as we speak.
Okay, just to make sure, full meaning like mechanical ventilation, and is that what you mean by full
Yes.
ventilation? Yeah.
Yes, forced air ventilation, yes. Thank you.
Have an additional question, Madam, if there's nobody else?
You can go ahead, and then I think we will be able to wrap this up.
I have two, actually. One is about the liaison between the COVID lead and the WeChew liaison partnership. I understand that, of course, we have a new member of our SO team, which is wonderful. And I've gone over the portfolios, et cetera, and I see that there's a COVID lead and then a WeChew liaison partnership. And I'm wondering, when we're forwarding folks, who are asking us questions to superintendents, how does that work? And what do we expect between the discussions between the senior administrators?
Through you, Madam Chair, we talk about COVID every day, most of the day, quite frankly. But Superintendent Allwender is the lead on COVID, and he will be taking the lead on that. We're always in conversation about each of these points. Trust me, we debate a lot. With respect to things like medication, the nurses coming into schools, those kinds of things, Superintendent Korbach will be taking the lead on those. I know he's dealing with a medication issue right now. So those kinds of things. So, but most of the on-COVID stuff belongs to Superintendent Korbach. And if you have any questions, just ask me.
And thank you for that, because it was important, because I didn't know how to or who to, so I appreciate that. One final thing, music. I see here that 2 meters is suggested, et cetera, and I take my colleague's point about an N95 mask. I've seen updated requirements that saying if you're really projecting, et cetera, particularly through a lesser mask than an N95, it goes a lot farther than 2 meters. So I just want to raise that concern. I think that our vocal programs also have taken a hit. Our instrumental programs have taken a hit. If we could have really large distancing, I would appreciate that. I don't think 2 meters is enough. So is there any way we can revisit that?
Who would like to take that one? Superintendent Awender, go ahead.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Madam Chair. At this point in time, we want them to be physically distanced as much as possible. So if it can be more than that, that's great. But given some of the classrooms that the music's going to be in, they're probably not going to allow for that. I think we're going to keep what the ministry has put out and what the health unit has suggested as our guidelines.
Thank you very much. Any last questions from trustees? Trustee Halberstadt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, under this format, which is very restrictive, is a notice of motion appropriate with regard to asking or directing Mr. Allender to try to put a football program together in conjunction with the conterminous boards, which, by the way, this Catholic board had a meeting last night, and Gino was, pretty well received. I didn't see it, but apparently it was pretty well received. So would that be an appropriate notice of motion?
Are you putting a motion on the floor this evening? That would be in order. A motion could be on the floor as a result of information in a report. That would be in order. But we don't have notices of motion on the agenda this evening. So if you're putting a motion on the floor, that could be entertained.
I think I'll pass to Trustee Cook. I think she has some wording.
Trustee Cook.
Yes, I'm wanting to put a motion on the floor this evening. Yeah, go ahead. So the Greater Essex County District School Board will certify all football helmets by September 7th, or send the football helmets out for certification by September 17th, 2021. Coaches need to be certified by September 30th, 2021. And then they'll be ready to play in the October season. If football cannot be played in October, then Greater Essex County District School Board will do whatever is needed to have these football players have somewhat of a season in the spring.
Do we have support for that? Trustee Halberstadt's been seconded. Trustee Cook, can you get your mic there?
Oh, sorry.
Do we have any questions on this motion on the floor? Trustee Burgess, go ahead.
This is where my math wasn't working before because I was trying to calculate the amounts of what that would be because I heard that all the helmets go together and I heard one amount and then I heard another thing. So how much would that cost to certify helmets that we may or may not use within this year? And they're certified annually, I heard. So if there is no season, it's a risk, but it's at least we have an option. So what's the cost?
Thank you for the question, through Madam Chair. It's going to be $70 to $80 per helmet, and I don't know the numbers of helmets that are out there in our system right now. I haven't counted them. So is that sufficient?
Well, I heard 882 to 1,000 helmets, but that was, I could understand, 3 different boards. I would think just because we have more high schools, we have like at least half of that, probably more.
Yeah,
That's just a guess.
Right. I honestly don't know the numbers because you have some teams that have 27 players. You have other teams that have the maximum, and I think it's around 62. So there's varying, right?
Thank you very much. I know that everybody has a question on this, but we're going to put everybody in line and do this in a. Do you have a point of information? That's in order.
Thank you. So I just thought as my information of the day is that I was doing fundraising for Riverside High School when the certification program came in, and it was so expensive. It's not $35. It was so expensive that we had to use bingo money to help pay for it. That's my point of information.
Thank you very much. I do have Trustee Halberstadt, and then Trustee Hatfield, Trustee Halberstadt, Trustee Hatfield, Trustee Sartori, and then Trustee Cheen. So Trustee Halberstadt, go ahead.
Yeah, the certification, I think it takes a bunch of the risk away. Yeah, it's going to be fairly expensive up front, but if there's no season this year, it's still wise to certify these helmets. So if it's 2022 or 2023, you don't have to, if you're not using the helmets, why would you have to?
No, they still have to be
What? I can't hear you.
Did you have a question, or you're just making a comment about the certification of the helmets?
Oh, well, if they're certified this year, it's 1 year. If they don't play, there'll be no.
No, it expires.
It expires even though they're untouched. Well, somebody's got to change that one.
We'll take that up the chain. Trustee Hatfield, go ahead.
Thank you. My question is with regard to the program. Are we talking about directing administration to put together a house league program, and who would be responsible for that? Because Lex has already decided against a program, so I'd like to know who would be responsible for a house league program. And I think the motion should clarify that.
Who's going to take that question? Superintendent Aywander, go ahead.
I get to go again. Honestly, I don't know. Right, so there isn't anybody right now. It'd have to be put out there. There'd have to be some volunteers, coaches, everything. So right now they're expecting not to play, but again, I don't know. I couldn't give you a person's name right now.
Do you have a supplemental to that? No? So I see a hand up from Trustee Chin too. I've got Trustee Sartori, and then Trustee Cook, and then Trustee Chin. Go ahead, Trustee Sartori.
Thank you. So can you just clarify how the certification is funded? So if I understood Trustee Hatfield, at least some of that expense was paid for through donations or fundraising, I should say. So how is the certification funded? And then I'm wondering if there is an amount that the board covers, was that amount not included in the budget for this year and then it was not spent? So then can that all be clarified?
Okay, thank you for the question, through you, Madam Chair. And you're talking about the research for the coaches?
Well, I guess everything. I don't have a full understanding of the program, so
Yeah.
I guess if I were to rephrase, if there is a portion that is of whatever the expense is, if it's certification of coaches, re-certification of helmets for safety, whatever that process is, and the school board covers usually at least part of that expense, and maybe this isn't a question for Superintendent A. Wonder, so through you, Madam Chair, was it budgeted for the current year or not, and then not spent?
That would be my guess.
I think your mic is not on.
So there's a few things here. I'll do the helmets first. That's a school expense, okay? And then the certification of the coaches, back when the memo came out, I'm going to say it was approximately 3 years ago, they brought in all these modules that they had to be trained in. And we had to have one head coach that was trained in all of those things. This is the year that now every coach has to be trained if they have any contact with the kids or any coaching with the kids. And so that money came from, well, it just came out of my miscellaneous, I guess. And so we pay the trainer, we pay for the trainer to come down. Again, it's virtual though now, but we used to pay for him to come down. We'd also, sometimes, depending, we had to pay for supply teachers because the availability might have only been during the day. But we tried to get it the first couple weeks before the football season started in the summer.
So supplemental, what I'm just trying to understand is just breaking down the motion a little bit, and I will have a couple of questions about the dates that were indicated as well when we come to round two, is basically whether are we looking for new money in our budget, or is it money that is there that we just haven't spent yet? So I'm not sure that I'm clear on that yet. Thank you.
So well, I'll let maybe Superintendent Armstrong do the schools, just the individual budgets. But as far as I just have money that I use out of my athletic budget. It's not budgeted for certification because we haven't had to certify anybody for a couple years at least, or maybe 1 or 2. And so it's just paid for, and it was done again in the summertime, so there wasn't a cost for that. So I have money in my budget to cover the certification.
Thank you. I think I understand now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got Trustee Cook and then Trustee Chin.
Thank you. So, I and no disrespect to anybody, but what I'm hearing is like a lot about the money, and it's almost like we don't want to spend it on football. And that's a rumor that has been going around, is that football was not going to be eventually stopped because of the money that's involved. What I want everybody to think about is there's other boards in Ontario that are playing football. We here have awesome football players we always have football players that get scholarships. I mean, Luke Wilson, look where he went. There's about 3 or 4 others that have played professionally. We have our Griffins who have won approximately 17 out of 19 championships in the last 18 years, I guess. And to say to them that you're not going to play, you didn't play last year, So that's, I mean, you saved money last year. So let's let them play this year. Let's get something in so these guys can get a scholarship or at least play. When other sports are going to be played and all of a sudden you guys are saying, but not football, certification can be done. You said the coaches can be certified. That's not a problem. You have the money in your budget. Let's get the money for the helmets. You didn't spend it last year, so it's got to be there somehow. I mean, you go talk to these kids out front that are waiting for scholarships and you tell them, I don't care. We're not going to play football. That's not fair. Those kids have been working hard, not for 1 year, but for many years, because this was a goal. COVID has already screwed many people.
Trustee Cook?
1 second. I'm speaking on behalf of the students too and these players. This makes me angry that we're sitting here when we have the money to debate it, when we can give these kids an opportunity to get a scholarship or an opportunity to show their skills. And we're going to sit here and debate about some money, about a helmet that might be $70. You've paid it all along. Why not this year? What's going on? Like what is it? That's my question. What's really going on with football?
Was that a specific question to?
It sounded like a question to me.
I'll try to answer the question. I don't believe there's anything going on around football. This is a unique circumstance. I've not heard that there's any desire to, and Superintendent Allender, you probably are much more informed, but I'm not aware of that.
The one statement you made, I will make a comment on, and that'll be my answer for this question. It is that absolutely are not trying to stop football. The last thing we want to do.
Trustee Cook? Thank you. Trustee Ching, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, I support Trustee Cook's opinion. I don't know much about that, but I did get complaints, concerns from the communities, and they strongly, want that we reconsider the decision. And I have information to share that the Ontario Trillium Foundation, they have a community building fund to repair, renovate, and retrofit existing sport and recreation facilities to help strengthen communities. And this from Ontario Trillium Foundation, and they start application today and till the end till September 30. And one of the how to say that, on the board, one of the person on the board did ask me to spread those information and hope the community, if they need help, they can apply. I wonder if we can apply because it's maximum 500,000 per year. So if we can try to let them know our situation and we can apply this funding, maybe it can help. And I wonder if it's possible to apply for this. Yeah, I can send a link if you can consider.
Yeah. Does anyone want to take that question of whether we would?
Thank you for the question. If you could forward it to us, we'd look into it, but I'm not sure that for this specific question, I don't think the amount of money here is the case. For the football issue, I think that can be covered. Should there, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I have, I'll get you guys on a list for the second questions. I do have first questions here from Trustee Olmsted and Trustee Leclerc. So I'm going to go with Trustee Olmsted first, and then it'll be Trustee Leclerc. Go ahead, Trustee Olmsted.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, again. This issue has been a tough one for me because my focus on the reopening of school is the safety of our staff and students. That's just where I am right now in my life, and so that is my focus. I empathize with the football players. My sons are athletes. I was an athlete. And I know how devastated my own kids are not being able to play the sports that they love. But my question is about the health unit. They're mandating or they're asking that sports be postponed for the foreseeable future. and then it will be reassessed, I guess, when numbers go down or we see how school openings play out with the number of cases going around. So I'm not really understanding a motion mandating a season when we don't even know if we have the capability of playing a season and what those implications would be with our health unit, as well as the ramifications of going against the other boards. As far as I can see, there's kind of like a collective agreement here. And I'm not sure what the other schools and the players in all of those other schools will feel like if there's a house league or a season being played in one board when there was an agreement for no one to play. I know the Catholic board, our local Catholic board, released today that school sports are on pause for the fall. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around the health unit's recommendation and then as well our relationship with our coterminous boards and the athletes' relationships with their fellow athletes.
Thank you very much. Who would like Superintendent Awender?
What's the question?
The question was about what the, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, Trustee Olmsted, what is our relationship to the health unit and their recommendations on this, and then what is our relationship with our coterminous boards and their decision-making on this?
Yeah, the relationship with the coterminous boards is excellent. And again, like I said, this wasn't a Superintendent Awender decision. It was a collective decision amongst a number of people. And as far as the health unit, it's an outstanding relationship with them. They have been fantastic throughout this whole time.
And through you, I would just like to add, through you, Madam Chair, that we will be following the directions of the health unit. It's upon us to do that, and I wouldn't be comfortable with anything else. I think that would be in violation.
Do you have a
I do.
Supplemental? Go ahead, Trustee Olmsted.
I do. I was just wondering, again, it was about that if we were to run a season, whether we could be sanctioned by WEXA because they have called off the season. Like, I know there's a lot of ducks that need to be in a row for this season to proceed. And I just see so many obstacles in the path. And certifying helmets are one thing and certifying coaches, but to ask for a season right now when we have the health unit mandating no, and WEXA saying no, like could we be sanctioned and be penalized next year if things go back to normal if we proceed with this kind of a season?
Trustee Olmsted, can you repeat that question again?
Sure. I was just wondering if WEXA could sanction us moving forward if we were to go against their decision and move forward with a season against their decision, and as well as with the health unit. I'm just not understanding if we can be sanctioned as a board, or our students or our athletes could have this opportunity taken away next year because of decisions today to go against the WEXA mandate.
Thank you for the question, through you, Madam Chair. I'd have to look at the Constitution to see if there's anything in there. It's a very good question. This is, to my knowledge, never happened before. So looking in the Constitution to see that, but part of the Constitution does talk that if we have 29 teams that are in the league, 29 schools that could hold a team for football. You have to have 40% of those schools participating over a 2-year period. And if there's less than 40% after the second year, then the sport could close. But as far as the sanctions go, I'm going to say that I don't think so, but again, I'd have to look at the Constitution.
Thank you very much. Trustee Leclerc, I'm going to go to you for your question.
Okay, Madam Chair, I don't have a question. I have a comment related to the motion.
If that's in order, go ahead, Trustee Leclerc.
Okay, thank you. So I'll start by saying I'm not a fan of participating by the phone. I am a fan of football. I am fundamentally upset by the fact that a decision was made to not proceed with the normal standard practices with an expectation that we would be able to provide football to our students. I think there's far more to this than just students that are looking for scholarships. Team sports are an important opportunity for our students to build working relationships. It's an opportunity for our kids to deal with mental health issues by being on a team and being active, participating in sports. It just really bothers me that a decision was made to not follow through as if we're having a normal season. Our board talked about the fact that we wanted to have the return in September to be as close to normal as possible. I realize that that's not going to happen, but as close to normal as possible. I support the motion. Clearly, if there's some changes in the health unit's direction and we end up with a fourth or fifth wave, then fine. But we should be planning to provide our athletes, our student athletes, the opportunity to play all sports, not just football. Football happens to be, for some reason, put on the guillotine at the beginning of the season, maybe because that's one of the first up, I don't know. But I really think that we have a responsibility to our student athletes. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Leclerc. Trustee Sipcar, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I just want to make sure I'm understanding everything correctly as well. So it's my understanding that we don't know how many helmets need to be certified, nor do we really know the budgetary implications of certifying these helmets for certain. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, just Trustee Sipcar, just the cost of the actual helmet, but how many helmets we have, I don't have that number.
Okay, thank you. And then so as a follow-up, one of the other trustees indicated that in the past that had been done through school fundraising, and it typically, that cost is, borne by, onto the student, I should say on the families and the school councils. Is that accurate?
Yes, it is.
So just so I'm clear, so to summarize, we don't know the budgetary impacts of this, and normally this cost is not footed by our administration. It's usually the school councils that take care of these certification costs.
Yes, school fundraising is typically where it would come from for the helmets. My particular budget is for the training of the coaches.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Am I allowed to make a comment, or is it just questions?
It's just, well, you can make a comment, but if I can put you in the queue for a second question, that it will actually be a comment. So I'll put you at the end for that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. So I do have second questions here. I have Trustee Sartori, Trustee Halberstadt, Trustee Burgess, and now Trustee Sipcar as well. So go ahead, Trustee Sartori.
Thank you. So just looking at the motion a little bit further, through you, Madam Chair, I'm just wondering if it can be clarified or stated again what the dates were that were indicated in the motion. And then once we know that, my question then is to administration, whether that is doable in those timelines.
So to the mover, the question is is it to reread the dates?
Yes, please.
So the dates would are to send the helmets out by September 17th, 2021, and for coaches to be certified September 30th, 2021.
Thank you. And then the second question from there was whether those dates are doable for those purposes.
I'd have to contact the trainer, and I don't know what their availability is, so that I can't tell you. As far as the helmets go, I could contact the individual tomorrow, and then he would let me know when he could come down to pick them up. He has told me that it's 6 weeks, so, I mean, I can ask him to speed it up as best he can, but 6 weeks is what he's told me.
If I could just add, this would assume people were willing to coach.
Thanks for clarifying.
Trustee Halberstadt and then Trustee Burgess. Go ahead, Trustee Halberstadt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I agree that we should go ahead with this. You know, there's 1,000 kids in football in our systems, and that's a lot of kids, you know, and they seem to be somehow overlooked compared to other spending that's happening. We're spending millions. We just heard the financials today. And okay, fine, we should spend millions, but to spend millions and millions on various other things and just say, okay, well, football is too big of a problem. It takes too long to put it together. We really don't have enough money. That's bogus. We got lots of money for everything. Lots of money. We have enough money for football. And just one other question, just one other fact. Dino handed out a paper today. Niagara, Burlington, Greater Toronto, London, Sault Ste. Marie, North Ontario, Kitchener, Guelph, Hamilton, Sarnia, Waterloo, Chatham, and Sarnia are all fielding football programs this year. So that's 13. We would be 14. So if they can do it, why can't we do it?
Trustee Burgess.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like the motion read again because I didn't write it all down. I have some concerns about if we can't do this, then the spring. That might be a bit of a deal breaker, knowing what the conditions of the fields will be and the competition of the other sports. But Mr. Faka isn't here, but what I wrote down was he said it was about $35,000 for, I don't know why, but 882 to 1,000 helmets. I guess.
Sorry, 3,500, I believe, was the.
He said 35,000, and so I took 35,000 divided by 882 and came up with almost $40. I'm struggling with the money because I know that over the years for all the fundraising for Red Raiders, Essex, et cetera, there's lots of, you know, I mean, there's a long history of school-based fundraising to supplement extracurricular stuff. So it's not a thing about money, but before we pass something, before we adopt something, I think we have to kind of know a vague idea. So I heard 35,000. And I heard 3 boards, and that was collectively, that amount of helmets was across 3 boards. I don't know how to extrapolate out of that what our portion would be, but I'm thinking it's probably like $25,000, probably our portion of it, across our system. Does that make sense?
Superintendent Arwar, can I ask you to respond to that? Because I think that's quite high. I may be wrong, but my understanding was a little bit different. And I do just want to mention to trustees, you know, there may be coaches who are not comfortable coaching. I do want to raise that as an issue.
That was the cost of helmets.
Yes, not the recertification is about, did you say $70? Superintendent, I don't want us to be way off in these numbers here.
No, the recertification is $70 to $80 per helmet.
Okay, but from what I gather, we don't know how many need to be certified. So we're
Guess half of that. Guess half of 800 would be pretty close, wouldn't it, Superintendent?
I would have thought more than half in a way. Because
Say it's 500 or whatever. I mean, I don't think that's a huge amount.
So I'm unsure of the actual amount. My point is, it doesn't sound like an extraordinary amount. It sounds like something we did put in our budget possibly and not use. It's something that we have done in the past. What I believe the motion will give us is an option if all the stars align, that we have certified coaches, that the We Choose says it's okay to proceed, that whether other WEXA partners go forward, we can, they won't. Well, who has that crystal ball? I would say I would agree, but but my predictions are that it would be like a house thing, and it's an opportunity for kids who have been real athletes to be scouted and offer. I mean, if one of them gets a scholarship, it more than exceeds whatever fundraising and whatever our contribution would be, kind of thing. So I think I support the motion if I can hear it one more time, but I would take out the spring thing because I don't think that's, I would offer that as an amendment to strike whatever that part of the motion.
Can we get Madame Leboeuf, would you mind reading the motion again?
Actually, I'm not clear that I have the entire motion, so I would need it in writing.
So from the mover, can we get that motion read again for clarity?
Hopefully I do it the same way. That the Greater Essex County District School Board send out the football helmets to be certified by September 17th, 2021, and coaches need to be certified by September 30th, 2021. And then they would be ready to play in the October season. And just so everybody knows, I'm not asking for
Is this part, sorry, we're just looking to get the motion.
Okay, all right. So the rest of that was about the spring, and I'm willing to take that out of the motion.
Are we putting an amendment on the floor to take that? Use your mic, please.
I am putting an amendment on to strike whatever it was after, I think I heard the word October season, but to strike whatever alludes to something in the spring.
So the motion on, does that amendment have a seconder? Trustee Cheen. We have an amendment on the floor. Can you read that the amended motion that we are considering now? Right now we are on the amendment, so we will be able to vote on the amendment, but I am very unclear about where we're at, and so I imagine other people are as well. Can you read the amended motion as has been put on the floor and supported? Yes, the amended motion, yeah.
Yep. That the Greater Essex County District School Board send out the football helmets to be certified by September 17th, 2021, and coaches to be certified by September 30th, 2021, and then then everybody will be ready to play in October. That's how it goes.
So that is the motion as amended. Motion seconded. That is on the floor. Any discussion on that amendment? Trustee Cheen.
Well, I have a question. Sent out by September 17, and they need time to finish that. And will that be finished in October? I think they need six weeks. Yeah. So how does it work? And I know the certified trainer is September 30. That's okay. But for the helmet, I just think the date might not be very doable, right?
So is the question whether we send these, because part of the amended motion that's on the floor now is that there would be a potential to play a season in October, and your concern is whether we send these helmets out to be certified September 17th, if that portion of the motion will be able to be withstand those dates. Is that your question? So Superintendent, I wonder if we sent out these helmets by September 17th, when is a conceivable time that the helmets would be certified and be able to be back in circulation for our players?
Well, if they get sent out September 17th, it's still a 6-week period.
So that would be end of October. I'll put you in the queue.
I said by September 17th in my motion.
Right. So if they're sent out, that was the question. If they're sent out by September 17th, they would be back by the end of October. Thank you for that. On this amendment, so that was a question on this amendment. Do you have a question on this amendment, Trustee Burgess?
No, I actually have another amendment, but I'll let.
Let's deal with this one.
Yep, one at a time.
Trustee Sartori, you're looking like you may have a question. Go ahead, Trustee Sartori.
Yes, and I look to you, Madam Chair, as to whether we can entertain my question now, or whether we are specifically focusing on the amendment, which was to remove the part about spring out.
We are,
Since there
yes.
was a question just asked about the dates, can I suggest an amendment as well? I'm not sure if it can be included as part of this one, or if it would be a new one after this one is completed. I look to your judgment, which is to change the September dates to say as soon as possible in September. Something like that. And I'm wondering if the original mover would be open to that. And that's based on what I think we've heard a couple of times from admin, which is some concern about those dates. But I can hold that if that's what you want me to do.
So I'm wondering if we can do this more effectively. The original amendment, can that be rescinded? Are the mover of the amendment and the seconder of the amendment, are you willing to rescind the original amendment that we are discussing right now?
Since I had an additional amendment that is even in addition to my colleague, I suggest a substitute motion and just clear the decks and put in a substitute motion. And the things that I am concerned about are such precise deadlines. I think that boxes us in. I think we send the helmets away as soon as possible, and all the rest of the motion is fine, and not say the word October, just say a fall season. Because if as soon as possible ends up being September 12th, and we get something back in October and some miracle happens and we choose fine, it might be a season in November, but it may not be a season in October. I don't know. I don't want to box it in. All I'm looking for is an option so that some kids are going to have some activity that they have been denied and have an opportunity for those scouts to see things, all the rest. So I think a substitute motion would be cleaner.
And Madam Chair, I would support that substitute motion.
So I can withdraw the amendment on
So
the
we
proviso
are,
that we have a substitute motion.
so we are withdrawing the original amendment. We do not currently have another amendment on the floor. Do you have a question if we are not dealing with the amendment? It has been withdrawn. The amendment has been withdrawn. We are on the main motion, though there has been the possibility of a substitute motion. Do you have a question on the main motion, which is what we're back on now?
I think so.
Go ahead.
You can tell me whether it's in order or not, but I guess I'm getting confused here, or concerned, or both, because we don't have anybody in charge of the program. The person that used to do helmet recertification is no longer doing that. We don't have anyone to organize the program. We don't have anyone to organize or be responsible for the recertification of the helmets. So it could take till October before we get a volunteer to come forward to do that. Or are we dumping this on a superintendent who are all busy trying to get our schools up and running? So like, I'm getting confused over the mechanics of all of this, and I just don't see it as being this simple because we don't have the personnel in place. So I'm just getting farther and farther away from feeling comfortable.
Thank you. I certainly share that concern because we are unclear of budgets. We are unclear of how many. We are unclear of dates. We are unclear of whether we get these. If there will be, we can't direct people to coach. We can't. There's a lot of things that are very unclear here. I'm very uncomfortable with putting hard dates on these sorts of things so that there will be a directive in place that can't possibly, due to things well outside the board's control, being volunteers or dates of certifications that if we direct, they wouldn't necessarily even be able to be followed through on. And it does make me uncomfortable as well. I don't know if there is a substitute motion that is being entertained, but I don't want to ignore Trustee Sipcar. We're back on the main motion, so the amendment is off the floor. We are back on the main motion. I know Trustee Sipcar did have a question. I don't want to exclude those of us joining on the phone. So Trustee Sipcar, did you have a question on the main motion?
Through you, Madam Chair, to be honest, no, I feel a little bit more confused, but all I will say is I think the lack of clarity and particularly the unknown cost and where that cost is coming from is my main concern. And I think in a time of COVID, when we are already strapped for our budget in different ways, and there are many other priorities and safety concerns, I am not inclined to support any amount of money, even if it's 500 students, that's 40,000 potentially. So I just think that if there had been more clarity around certain numbers, or even just that we would allow the season to go ahead, then I might be supporting it. But the motion as it stands, I can't support until season.
Thank you very much. Do I have any other comments on this main motion? Trustee Cook.
So I'd like to clear up some stuff. You're asking for volunteers. There's volunteers to coach. When they had their press conference out front of the board office last week, there were volunteers there that said that they would do what they need to do to coach. Both our superintendent and our director said, we have the money. And the helmet cost is $70, approximately $70 per helmet for approximately 400 helmets. The reason why I have September 17th in the motion that the helmets to go out by September 17th is because it does take 4 to 6 weeks. Our superintendent said that he could talk to them and see if they could speed it up. And so therefore those helmets would be back in October. At some point when they go out by September 17th, the helmets would be back in October. And that should clarify some of the questions. If we leave it open for those helmets to be sent out sometime in September, I'm sorry, I wouldn't be able to support that because I want some structure around this so that we know that it's being done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Trustee Chin, yes, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I think the main point of this motion is that whether we want to endeavor to make it possible to keep the sports, or we just let it go, deny. So I think we should, try, do our best to make it possible. And I think Trustee Hatfield made a good, point that we have to think from the mechanism. And I wonder if we can appoint a kind of association or committee, and they involved the volunteers together and let them to find out the most effective way to do. I think they are very experienced and they know a lot of relationship, and they may make things better. So what we
is now exiting.
So what we want to do is that give the platform for them to work out a way to solve the issue, and we can just give the attitude to support them, to work with the association and the volunteers to find a way to have it done. Thank you. Yeah.
If I could just clarify, just to remind trustees that any student activity is supervised by staff of the school board. While we can have volunteers, the staff of the school board are responsible for students, and so that is mandatory that there is somebody associated with the team, just to clarify.
Yeah. The volunteer that I mentioned is on the board, is on the association to find out a way to do that, not volunteer to coach, something like that, because they know the relationship, they know how to work out. So, and they know maybe some association who can apply for the funding. So I think that we just give them permission to start doing that.
So Superintendent, I wonder, can you clarify, we have an association, WEXA, that does these. I wonder if you can clarify, because I think it may provide some clarity to an association that we belong to currently, who does some of that coordination for us. But if you can clarify WEXA as an association that we have.
Right. Well, WEXA is our association for our athletics, and it's people from all the different boards that are there. There's senior administration, there's administrators, there's teachers. And they make the decisions, they make the schedules, they go out and get the conveners then set up the events and book the venues. And they're all staff of the school boards.
Sorry, but we're doing this outside of WEXA. We're not doing it within the association, correct? We can't go to the association and ask them to provide conveners and all of that, because we're, okay, it was just getting more confusing.
Thank you. So I have Trustee Sartori. We're on, it's a good question. We're on the main motion. We're back on the main motion again. So the amendment failed, or the amendment was rescinded. We are back on the main motion again. And we are debating that, and we will be calling a vote on that main motion, I guess, shortly, provided no one else has second questions. We are on our second questions, and Trustee Sartori, go ahead.
Thank you. So thank you for clarifying that we are back to the main motion. So I'm just going to summarize my position on the main motion. And unless, something changes to that motion. I really agreed with something that Trustee Cheen said a couple of minutes ago, and that is that clearly we are all sitting here trying to find ways to make football happen if it can happen, based on health and safety, based on volunteers coming together, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's great. I think it's positive. I think it's very unfortunate that, during COVID over the last year and a half, I'm not even sure when football was last played. And I think that there are probably a number of other sports as well that, due to COVID and other activities, that kids haven't had the opportunity to participate in. And I'm concerned too for those students who, were looking to be scouted and that they were looking for scholarships. I think it's very unfortunate. Unfortunately, the motion as it stands right now, I can't support. And I can't support it for a few reasons, and one of them being that there are too many, on the one side, too many unknowns. On the other hand, it's so specific that if we are keeping all of these dates, I worry then that, frankly, we're setting administration up for failure, right? That they won't be able to meet those dates, and it's not fair. As I said before, I was willing to support a substitute motion that made some changes. maybe that is still possible. I haven't written my own, but that's the stage that we are at now in this debate, unfortunately. And I can't support the motion as it stands. And it's very unfortunate. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Any last comments on the motion? So I do have Trustee Halberstadt and Trustee Burgess have not given a, or sorry, Trustee Burgess, you have given a second comment already or question on this. Trustee Halberstadt, go ahead.
Okay, so if the main motion fails, then we're doing nothing. We've been talking about this around the table for 2 hours and we're not going to do anything. So I want to know if this motion fails, where do we go? Back to the mini motion? Where else?
We're on the main motion now, and if it fails, we move forward in the agenda.
So it's, football is dead if we this. That's a tragedy in my mind.
Thank you very much. Do I have any last? I'll wait here on my phone to see. Trustee Burgess, you've already had two.
Yes, Madam, I'm looking for your guidance because I am ready for a substitute motion if that's possible. And that can happen before the main motion. But I'm willing to, but I will have a motion after this that is, I think, significantly different. I can go amendment by amendment by amendment.
I actually don't know whether the main motion has to be withdrawn in order to put a substitute in, or whether we put a substitute in at any point. So here's what I'm going to do.
Okay.
I am going to ask your permission and your collegiality to, on Trustee Halberstadt's point, we've talked about this for an hour and a half. The rules are that Trustee Burgess isn't allowed to ask a second question, isn't allowed to comment at all anymore because she's asked two. However, I think in the spirit of what we're trying to do, we want to be able to at least address this. But I think we've had enough discussion on what we're trying to get at that I would like to keep, if she's going to do a substitute motion, I'm keeping it tight, guys. We have an entire return to school update and we've spent an hour and a half on football, and I'm empathetic. But I think we have a series of stakeholders out there who are concerned about football in addition to everything else that we're discussing. And it is a part of my role to be respectful of that as well. And so I'm hoping that we can all be supportive of each other here. Trustee Burgess, do you have something to put on the floor?
I'll just say it, and if I could speak to it, then I will, and see if there is support. That the GECDSB send out football helmets that require recertification as soon as possible to have an option for a safe football season this calendar year.
Does that motion have a seconder? Trustee Sartori. So I have a question from Trustee Cook and a question from Trustee Cheen on that motion. Can you read it one more time for us?
That the Greater Essex County District School Board send out football helmets that require recertification as soon as possible to have an option for a safe football season this calendar year.
Thank you. Trustee Cook.
I was just going to say that I'm willing to withdraw my motion and support that motion.
Look at this. Trustee Cheen.
Yeah, whatever motion I will support. I don't want anything to, to change. So I support.
I want every comment to be like this from now on. Go ahead, Trustee Burgess, quickly, and then we'll call the question.
Yeah, I just want to speak to it because what it says is for an option for a safe football season. Things can be precluded and not have that. This calendar year means that if it goes into December, it goes into December. And only those helmets that require recertification, obviously. So I don't know the budget for it, but I think that we can afford it. It gives us an option. And if other things happen, that's because the season's not meant to be. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I'll make a last comment and then we'll call the question. You'd like to make an amendment to this? Is it significantly different? Go ahead, Trustee Hatfield, with an amendment.
The amendment that, with the option of a house league football program. Because, you know, we're going to rile up WEXA on this. The other school boards haven't changed their position. And I think that it's important that we clarify that it's a house league program of this board only. So I would ask for that to be considered as an amendment.
If I could,
So that amendment has been seconded. Trustee or Director Kelly, go ahead.
I just want to acknowledge that there's who's convening this and like who's running this House League. And I think that's an area of problem. I'm raising it for trustees. Thank you.
Any comments on the amendment? Trustee Burgess.
For clarification then, I said for a safe football season, and that could be a house league, or perhaps maybe at other boards are reconsidering. I have no idea. I've heard that there isn't, and I know there's strong recommendation from WECU right now that, you know, that it's not happening right now. So why would it be, is it more problematic to put the amendment in stating the house league? Or is it better just to leave it to an option for a safe football season?
Through you, I'm just raising the point of who is doing the work to convene the House League. I don't know the answer. I'm just raising that point, Trustee Burgess.
Thank you. And I do this very humbly, and I through you, Madam Chair, I realize this is another pivot that we're throwing everybody into. So I realize that, but I'm willing to put this, that's on the floor.
So I'm going to call the question on the amendment. The amendment is to include the word house league. What is the amended motion, Trustee Burgess?
I think it's probably to strike the word.
Can you read just the amended motion?
Oh, I didn't support the amendment. The amendment, this is the substitute motion. So I'm thinking it's probably an option for a safe house league football season to insert the word house league in between safe and football.
So that
I believe is the amendment.
That is the amendment on the floor. I'm going to call the question, all in support of that amendment on the floor.
Support.
That's 2 in support, and that fails. We are back. It's 3. That's 3 in support. It still fails. Thank you very much. So just to keep everybody all together here, the motion that we have on the floor is the original motion that Trustee Burgess substituted in here. I think it might be enough. Actually, let's read it one more time, just for clarity. I think we're all a little bit confused right now, so I want to make sure that we're as clear as possible on what we're voting on. So please read that motion one more time.
The original motion unamended, that the GECDSB send out football helmets that require recertification as soon as possible to have an option for a safe football season this calendar year.
So I'm going to call the question on that. I feel like I haven't gotten to say what I wanted to, but I think I've said enough. We are, to Director Kelly's point, I want us to all be very aware here that what we are voting on is not only stepping outside of what we currently are supporting here, which is our administration's decisions based on health and safety for all of our students and what we currently have as a return to school plan. we're also going outside of our decision making along with our coterminous boards. We're going outside our decision making with WEXA, with an association very familiar with all of this. I am not. I've heard many trustees tonight talk about how unfamiliar they are with this process. And we're directing a process right now that we don't know the cost of, we don't know the capability of, we don't know the people involved, we don't know the safety involved, and we have WETU on the other side saying, not only is it not absolutely not happening until November, they're saying to us it could be weeks or months before we know anything more. And we're sitting in the middle of a fourth wave, a week for school to come back. I cannot, in good conscience, for all of those reasons individually, let alone all of them together, ask our administration to reverse their decision, which is effectively what we're doing here. And I support what our administration has come up with, and I empathize entirely. If this was band and my kid played an instrument, man, would I be pissed. Yes, I would. And I would really want her to be able to play. And it would really make me mad. But I, here in this room, in this governing body, trust the administrators and the decisions that they came up with. Trust that there are many smart people in a room having these discussions. And administration is hearing us that we want, at all possible, we like football. We want it to happen. So all these rumors about that we're trying to get rid of football, look around you. We're not. We want it to happen, but we need it to happen safely. So I'm calling the question on the motion. All in favor of the motion on the floor? 4, 5,
Support.
6. So that's 6, and that motion passes.
Excuse me, for the record, I've decided to abstain.
Thank you. Trustee Hatfield has abstained. All right, we'll move forward through our agenda. Thank you, trustees, for working your way through that. Thank you to senior administrators for all of the answers to those questions. I'm looking at E2, our vaccination declaration, a large topic of discussion, not only in our board, but in the province today. So, Superintendent Houston, is that you?
Certainly, thank you. So, Madame Leboeuf, is the PowerPoint going to come up? I
She
think
was so
after
caught
all
up in
that,
the
we
motion.
forgot. So I just did a quick little PowerPoint, and I didn't send it ahead of time because it seems to be changing by the minute. But I know that there's lots of questions around the immunization disclosure policy and the testing requirements within the education sector moving forward. So obviously, the next slide, please. The objective of it is to support safer schools in Ontario. It was set out by the province to have a COVID immunization disclosure in schools and to optimize our vaccination rate within our schools, and to ensure that our employees have access to information required to make an informed decision about vaccination, and to ensure that any of our employees that are not vaccinated are routinely being tested for COVID across the province within all of the school boards. So the next slide, please. So the individuals that are included are all school board employees, as well as frequent visitors and our volunteers and any other professionals who deliver services within the school, and anybody who would be interacting with our students who may even be a third-party contractor. The policy may include school board trustees, our occasional teachers on a supply list, or students who are coming into our schools on practicums, nurses coming into our school on practicum placements, and our volunteers, as well as our school bus drivers through the consortium. So there's basically 3 pieces. An employee will have to do an attestation, And the first one would be that they provide proof of their full vaccination, which would mean that they've received 2 immunizations, as well as they've had the 14-day period following their second vaccination, and they would attest to that. They will have to upload their actual vaccination receipts through the Ministry of Health that's provided through your OHIP card. Some challenges with that may be some staff who potentially were vaccinated, for example, in Michigan or outside of Ontario, wouldn't be able to do that process, but we would find a way to capture those. The next one would be somebody would have to do an attestation to say that for a medical reason that they cannot be vaccinated, and they would have to provide an official document about being medically exempt. We don't know the reasons for the medical, but they would have to provide that, and we do that typically for a variety of other things through human resources and our wellness officers. They would be required to be testing through the rapid antigen tests because they are not vaccinated individuals. The third group would be somebody who is not vaccinated. They would by choice or perhaps other reasons not have received their vaccinations. They would be required to participate in an educational program that is going to be provided by the Crown. We're still waiting to receive that, to highlight for them the importance of vaccination and the reason why people should be vaccinated. They as well will also have to do the rapid antigen testing in order to be able to attend work. So the next piece is around the actual testing. So I've mentioned that both of those groups would have to actually do the testing, but those that have chosen to not vaccinate would be required to participate in the educational session. Those that are not vaccinated because of a medical exemption would not be required to do the educational session. And then the next. So all school boards across the province of Ontario will be required to publish the percentage of employees that are fully vaccinated, and we also have to report that number to the Ministry of Education through a spreadsheet that's been sent out to us. So at this point, I can entertain any questions. I know it's a quick overview. We receive, I think, every day different information about stuff, and trying to keep up with it sometimes is a challenge, and to have it in place very quickly. The tests, from what I understand, are on their way to the school boards today, that they're being shipped to us, so we're looking forward to receiving those. And our IT department is working fast and furious. We were hoping through our provincial HR systems that we would be able to do the attestation. That hasn't come through. So our IT department has taken on the additional task with another vendor to be able to provide the attestation for us as quickly as possible. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Trustee Burgess, go ahead. Thank you very much for that, by the way. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Through me, Madam Chair. It's about the provision of the tests and the supply of the tests. I know they're not perfect. I know that in our OPSPA meetings, we have asked and asked and asked for months, and the province is in them. So I'm wondering who pays for it? Is it just like PPE? It just flows and we have so many? What is the amount? What's the expectation of frequency of rapid antigen tests for those who are not vaccinated?
So the initial shipment that's coming to us, Superintendent Armstrong and I did some measurements today because they send you the actual dimensions of the size of the packaging and how many are included in it. So our first shipment is they base it on 20% of what your employee total amount would be, assuming that 20% of our employees would need to be tested. They send that to us. It is exactly like the same PPE shipments that come in. And then it gets dispersed from here. Of course, there's concerns around privacy and someone knowing that someone else hasn't been vaccinated when we're giving out those testing kits. As of right now, which may change, so if I'm unvaccinated and I have to do the testing, I don't have to show that to anybody. I just go in and do an attestation that I've done my mandatory antigen testing, and I click off that it was negative.
Just give me 1 second. If those if the people on the phone could probably mute their phones. I'm just hearing a little bit of feedback from the phone, and it's a little bit distracting. So if I can get my phone participants to please just mute while you're at home. And go ahead, Trustee Burgess. Sorry to interrupt.
I think I lost my thought. I lost my.
Was it about the declaration of the negative?
It was what's built on honesty and what's built on verification. So if you, I think I heard you say, I just want to make sure, through you, Madam Chair, if you are vaccinated, but you are required to take an antigen test?
If you are vaccinated, no.
You don't?
No.
Okay, I thought
But if
there
I'm
was
not
something there that
vaccinated-
you were vaccinated, but because of some, you've been quarantined or isolated or something, I don't know what.
So that's a separate piece around the outbreak protocol.
I don't want to confuse anything. I just
Right.
wanted to,
Yes.
is there any verification, the checking of the box, is there, can you check a box without actually doing something?
I would say yes, you could. Just like our self-assessment tool now, I could check off no to everything and report to work. It's based on honesty and I guess the moral, ethical piece of keeping everybody else around me safe as well.
Thank you for that. Trustee Sartori, did you have a question?
That was actually my question. The second one that Trustee Burgess asked was around, I think you may have said if you are vaccinated and you've done the rapid test, but you clarified. Thanks.
Trustee Cheen, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is that because the fourth wave is kind of more, target the children, and more percentage of the children suffered. And we know that many children, they are a symptom, even they have the virus. So it's kind of it's very risky for the kid to have a symptom virus and still be school for many days. So I wonder if we can take action on the forehead thermometers every day. And if we don't have time, at the beginning, we can do that during the day to frequently check everybody. And once we have anybody, got a fever or abnormal, and we can take action. I think this can, prevent a lot of, further damage. So it's not costly. So I wonder if we can take it.
So to my knowledge, that's not part of the vaccination declaration that we're discussing here, but I pass that through to Superintendent Houston.
Sure. So this is strictly to employees. There has been, and I'm sure some trustees who are part of OPSPA are aware that there is discussion about once it's rolled out for employees, there's the potential that it may be rolled out for students. I know the colleges and universities are already doing that. But in terms of testing of any students, that is not something that's been mandated by the province as of yet, or by the local health unit.
Supplemental?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't assume that is a requirement from provincial. I just, from our board, if we can make this suggestion, if we can do that. Because I think we cannot, 100% just follow their direction, and we have our thought, and we can discuss and think if it is reasonable, we can take action, right? Extra action.
So that's not on the vaccination declaration. The vaccination declaration wouldn't.
Oh no, yeah, we can put anywhere. Yeah, not this part is okay. Yeah, I just think it's necessary.
So we're just taking questions on the vaccination declaration right now, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Sipkar on the phone has a question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Superintendent Houston. I just want to understand, is this vaccination declaration something that is being mandated by the province, or is this something that our board is taking initiative on specifically?
So thank you for the question through you, Madam Chair. This has come as a directive from the Ministry of Education, obviously in consultation and partnership with the Ministry of Health and our local public health as well.
Thank you. And so just as a supplemental, we're not being mandated then to have a mandatory vaccination policy, but it's just a mandatory declaration. And as a further to that, what would be the implications of our board potentially pursuing that?
So thank you for that question, again, through you, Madam Chair. So to mandate vaccines would be very challenging for us as a board. It would be an individual school board that would be doing that. There has been legal counsel provided through OPSPA to senior negotiators that there really is no current legal mandating of vaccinations other than any vaccinations that fall under the Health Act, and this does not yet fall under the Health Act. So if you think about our little yellow immunization records, anyone that's recorded on there is under the Health Act as a mandatory vaccine. This is not there yet, not to say that it won't get there, but mandating them at this point would be extremely challenging. And legal counsel has advised that the employers do not mandate vaccinations of their employees for a variety of reasons, particularly human rights and privacy. And their basic words were that requiring people to be vaccinated is a non-starter, and there's no background in terms of where that would go to in the event that it ever went to an arbitration. You wouldn't be able to terminate somebody because they weren't vaccinated because it's not mandated through the act under the health. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. And one more supplemental if I'm allowed. Can I just get some clarity around what our provincial body, meaning OPSPA's position is on this, if you know it, and also any other actions that other school boards have taken across the province?
It's been quite a lively discussion with our colleagues at OPSPA. They did put out, which I'm sure all of you saw and received a copy of, their position around the immunization disclosure policy and extremely supportive of it. I haven't seen OPSPA put out, and any of you that are part of OPSPA executive area could correct me, or the director, but I haven't seen anything around mandated vaccinations for employees. And I'm aware that one board potentially may be considering it, but of the group of human resources superintendents across the province, everybody will be following the self-disclosure of vaccinations.
Trustee Burgess, did you have a comment?
Just for
as
information,
OPSPA?
we have an article right here from Canadian Press that the largest school board in Canada, the Toronto District School Board trustees, did pass a mandatory vaccine policy, etc. I think that's what it says. I think that the legal opinion on that is probably that can be challenged. But my understanding is that Toronto District has gone ahead with that.
So
However, OPSPA was in the discussions was trying to push for mandatory, but the response back, etc., settled at the disclosure policy.
So I do know that OPSPA has put out an opinion on to Superintendent Huston's point about adding COVID-19 immunizations to the Act. So OPSPA has advocated for that, for COVID-19 vaccinations to be added to the Act. But Toronto District School Board reinforced the ministry's COVID vaccination disclosure. They added 2 dates of declaration. That's kind of how they went over and above it. So it is not a mandatory vaccination, but they did add, they did supplement and added 2 additional dates of declaration for their employees to kind of incentivize, I would imagine, I'm editorializing here, to maybe incentivize them to go in and get vaccinated in that interim. But that is the addition that they added to that policy, was to add those 2 additional dates. But it wasn't to my knowledge, to my reading of it, and I read the actual motion and then I read the reports on it, that it was just reinforcing that, but adding those extra 2 incentives. And I stand to be corrected on that, but that was my reading on it. So.
And just to add to that, we as a board, to the point about additional opportunities, plan to continue with the education around with our local health partner, as well as our union partners around the importance of vaccination for those that can be vaccinated. And then you could go back in and change your initial attestation that you have become fully vaccinated. So that will always be an option for our employees to do, in hopes that our percentage will get higher and higher as we move forward.
Do we have any other questions from trustees? I did have a question. So when they do their attestation and that gets uploaded, and then did I read correctly that we're also going to have a place for them to, are they going to be uploading their vaccination certificate? Are they going to be supplying it through COVAX? Do we have access to that? And kind of there's a lot of data privacy there, and I'm sure Superintendent Mills is right on it. And I understand that there's probably been a lot of discussion around this. So I'm just wondering, what's the kind of process that we have for information and for gathering that information and protecting that information on behalf of our staff?
Thank you for that question. So it does come through COVAX, but not directly through COVAX to us. The employee goes through COVAX to upload. So they're accessing their own private information. So working with Tayeb in IT, we're very particular of who's going to access those records, exactly the same as who is able to access our offense declaration as an example. There will be very, very limited access. Being the privacy officer, I'll be one of them. Tayeb would be another one of them, and perhaps one other person would be able to access who is vaccinated fully and who is not vaccinated, or who's not vaccinated for medical reasons. It will be very well protected, and Tayeb has done all of the research about where it's being stored, and I have full confidence that he would never lead us anywhere where we wouldn't go to make sure that it's protected at all times.
Thank you very much for that. I know that's a big concern on people's minds, and so I appreciate that. Trustee Burgess, did you have a question? Go ahead.
So we are being supplied with about 20% of staff. To me, that's an arbitrary number, but it's obviously built on some sort of modeling, right? Do we know percentage of our staff? Will 20% be enough for antigen testing, with the assumption that that meets the amount of our unvaccinated staff to be tested?
So Trustee Burgess, that's the $1 million question. And if anybody has an answer. So until we actually have people doing the attestation, and I'm sure you can appreciate that we were informed on, I think, August 18th. We just found out today the tests are coming. We just found out that the HR system isn't going to be able to do it. So Tayeb quickly yesterday and today worked on it, but to roll it out for September 7th. And then we would be able to have the number of people based on what some of the others have already done, the colleges and universities. It is lower than 20% of employees. We also know, if there is a shortage, for example, not coming quick enough, there are places, St. Clair College on their own has gone out and purchased some. Windsor Regional Hospital has gone out on their own to purchase some in case there was a backlog, so that they do have a supply of them. So we could borrow if we needed to, I think. Or other school boards, I'm sure we would lend each other to.
I love these informal partnerships that happen as we move forward through this. I'm appreciative of that across our institutions. Trustee Sipcar, do you have a comment or question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to maybe ask for the consensus of my colleagues about a letter to advocate in a similar vein to OPSPA's advocacy around having COVID vaccinations added to the Health Act so that they can be mandated within our schools. I think, I hope that a lot of my colleagues support keeping our kids as safe as possible. And I just think that, while maybe we're not in the position to do that around this table, I would like to advocate at the highest levels as much as possible. And I think a letter explaining our concerns and also indicating our desire for a more clear policy around mandatory vaccines would be something I hope that we could get consensus for.
So Trustee Sipcar is seeking consensus from all of us here to send a letter that I am assuming, and Trustee Sipcar, please correct me if I'm wrong here, that would be much in line with the OPSPA's position on this, and that we would be offering our board's support for that advocacy in a letter to probably to the minister and to the I'm going to say the Minister of Health, Minister of Education, Premier. Anybody I'm missing?
Yes,
Chief Medical Officer of Health. Maybe Dr. Ahmed can carry that up with him when he goes. So I'm looking for consensus on this, meaning if anyone has strong opposition to sending such a letter, please let me know. Does anyone have strong opposition to sending such a letter up to the province and to the ministers in our support of that advocacy to add COVID-19 vaccinations to the Health Act? Not hearing any opposition, so it looks like that letter can go forward. I appreciate that, Trustee Sipcar. Anything further from trustees on this? I just had one final question about the information that's going to be going up on the website, or I assume it's on the website, about staff that's vaccinated and that kind of, how is that going to be facilitated? Where will that be on the website? And when can, owing to the fact that this is kind of happening and like you're spinning your wheels underneath the water here, when can that reasonably be expected to be up for the community to be able to know that information?
Another great question. There is a date, and I want to say the 10th of September it needs to be posted on the website, and it is the overall fully vaccinated employees. It's not by individual groups, it's not by individual school, it is one number of our total number of employees percentage, and we will work with IT to get that posted on the website.
And just for clarity, does that also include us? That number would include us?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much, trustees and administrators. Thank you very much to Superintendent Houston and her team, and Superintendent Mills and your team for all the work on that. That is, as it always is, ongoing, but incredibly timely. And I'm sure that it's being touched on in our professional development with our staff as well. So I'm sure you're fielding questions from all sides. So I really appreciate that tonight. So we're moving through our agenda now to E3, equity and anti-Black racism. And Superintendent, Director Kelly can start, and then we will welcome Superintendent Howitt.
Thank you very much, through you, Madam Chair. I'm pleased to introduce tonight's presentation with respect to some updates on some of the work that we've been doing in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and specifically some highlights tonight on anti-Black racism work. As we learn, unlearn, and improve, I think, across our system. And as a senior team, I know that Superintendents Howitt, Houston, Canty, and everybody here has been working very hard on this, but we're going to present some of the work that we've started to give some highlights about the work and the work ahead. And a lot of that starts tomorrow with a big symposium that has been led largely by Superintendent Howitt, and we really appreciate the leadership, and we have a busy day tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Director. I have a quote on the screen from Dr. King. His words are forever eloquent, inspirational, and poignant, and we thought that this particular quote encapsulated the work that we've been doing since the spring, that this work is the work of not one or one group of people, but the collective work, not only of us here at the board office and within our district, but within our community. And we are stronger when we work together. And there has been a great momentum that has begun, and that we are emphatically dedicated to continue to do this very important work. On the next slide, you'll see tonight we're going to talk to you about 4 things. One of them is the development of the Anti-Black Racism Committee, also the development of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, some staff professional development, and an update on the Black Graduation Coach and the CYF positions. You'll note the picture that's added to the screen. When we're giving you an update on anti-Black racism, it's impossible not to acknowledge the intersectionality with other areas. So although this is about anti-Black racism, you will see an infusion of the integrated work. I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Superintendent Canty.
Thank you, Dr. Howitt. So this is what we've done with our advisory committee. We reached out to the different Black communities and we had them come together to meet with us. The first meeting was on May 11th, and that was when we sat in the discomfort of listening to the harm that many institutions, including our educational institution, has done to the Black community. I was thankful to have Superintendent Houston there to talk about representation and hiring practices, and also Superintendent Howitt to discuss our training plan moving forward. June 8th was our second meeting. We met and we shared not only what we got pulled together and found the findings from our first meeting in terms of what they saw as problems that we have in our institution, but also we shared the Indigenous Education Advisory Committee's protocol and the York Dismantling Anti-Black Racism Strategy. What we're doing on the next meeting, I'll talk about the August 24th in a moment, but we're following up at the end of this month, and we're going to be looking at those 2 documents and beginning to develop, in consultation with the Black communities, our own anti-Black racism strategy. We had to have an ad hoc meeting on August 24th, just a few days ago, because we had some important new positions that we're going to be having, and we had to get the input from the community in terms of what we're going to call the CYF. We heard loud and clear from the community they did not like change your future, because there was some negative implications to that. We came up with some names from the community and we posted them in a survey, and they came up with create your future. And with that, I'll push it over to Superintendent Houston.
So we will be changing the name of the program to Create Your Future, and the counselors will be called Create Your Future counselors moving forward. We've worked with PSSP from OSSTF in the bargaining unit, and they are completely, fully in support of making the name change, because it actually is written in the collective agreement. So I believe that Superintendent Canty is going to, or already has shared with the community, that that was the name that we'll be using moving forward.
Yes, we did share that, and they were very pleased. It was an overwhelming amount of percentage of people that preferred that name over the others. And so I'll put it over to Dr. Howe, please.
Thank you, Superintendent Canty. Another item that we have been exploring is the development of a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. There was an Equity Committee in place. However, we are rejuvenating it, understanding that the individuals that sit on this committee need to be people that are experience the lived experience, if you will. It needs to be considered through their lens, because fundamentally the purpose of this committee is about dismantling systemic barriers. And you'll see on the screen that we've included how will we define that. The systemic barriers are defined as policies or practices that result in some individuals from unrepresented groups receiving unequal access to or being excluded from participation in employment, services, opportunities, or programs. These barriers in nature, meaning they result from institutional level practices or policies or traditions and or values that may be unintended. or unseen to those who do not experience them, but have a serious and long-lasting impact or implication on the lives of those affected, such as pathways, career trajectories, and or mental or physical health. In saying that, we need to have individuals on the committee that are of the lived experience. So tomorrow, the director will be addressing her staff, talking about the development of this committee, and you'll see in the next slide, the superintendents, we sat together and talked about, well, should we select this person or that person? And then we said, you know what? We really need to put it out to our staff to self-select if they would like to serve on this committee. Like many other boards where there are self-assessments conducted, we created a self-assessment. It doesn't look like this anymore. It's actually in the format of a survey with drop-down menus. But essentially, a person in our district and our staff will say, you know, I'd like to sit on that committee. They would complete the survey where they would identify if they chose, and then rank themselves based on the criteria there, you know, the lived experience, awareness and involvement with community and diverse communities, policy development, resource development, those types of items. I'm sure you can read them there, but they're self-assessing so that we can see an array of skills coming to the table and individuals who are self-declaring to do this work. We imagine and we know the great thing about our district is we have many people who are passionate and care about not just being an ally, but being an upstander. But preferential treatment will be given to those individuals of the lived experience. So that goes out tomorrow. We're excited about that and excited to see the people who declare interest. As Director Kelly said, tomorrow is the launch of our complete day dedicated to diversity, equity, and inclusion training. In the next slide, you'll see that we have keynote speaker Tanya Talega, who is a Indigenous storyteller. We also have plenary keynote Dr. Jillian Parekh, who does a presentation on unconscious bias on learning skills and assessment practices. And then we also have a plenary keynote, Kyle Simpkins, who is a street performer. His company is in Cirque. It's around mental wellness. He's very entertaining. We even have stress balls that have been, Erin's our Vanna, she'll show you them.
So these balls, sorry to interrupt, these balls have our strategic plan pillars on the balls. Very, very cool.
So that's a way of sharing the new strategic plan with all of our staff, but Kyle will take them through an activity of juggling. It's fantastic, and we think is a really lighthearted way to inspire staff and have them feel good. The next slide will show our breakout speakers. We have Nigagwadin Sinclair, James Sinclair, who is talking about reconciliation. Our very own community, Irene Moore Davis, who will be speaking on Black history in Windsor and Essex County and dispelling myths. Dr. Andrew Allen from the University of Windsor speaking about equity, diversity, inclusion, and social justice in the curriculum. Aya Khan about teaching about Islamophobia. Beth Veal, a very popular session, again, supporting mental health and well-being for staff. She's talking about making space for contagious awesomeness, very asset-based, as well as Alice T. from ETFO, who will be speaking about anti-Asian racism, and Chris D'Souza, who will be speaking about anti-oppression and anti-racism in the Canadian context. So we're really excited about this. There's a pre-survey and a post-survey, so we can measure staff's comfort level in the area and also their ideas about where they want to go with learning so that we can be responsive. In the next slide, you'll see that we also have planned our November 12th Professional Development Day, and we have secured Desmond Cole, the author of The Skin That We're In. Very excited to have Desmond come. We also will have a half hour dedicated to the staff census data and the opportunity for staff to complete that. And also, we will be releasing the up-to-date, they're finalizing is happening right now on the content of the Roads to Freedom elementary and secondary document. And for the first time ever, we will have 1 hour of dedicated bright space module of professional development for all of our staff. So we're super excited about that as well. And in the next slide, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Superintendent Houston.
So we do have 3 days coming up for training with Kojo Institute. in September, 3 different Mondays it'll be happening, and it will be for all of our senior administration team, as well as all of our principals and vice principals, and all of our managers and supervisors, as well as all of our HR human resources. There's 3 separate modules that Kiki presents to us. There's small groups that we get into, and it's all specifically focused around addressing anti-Black racism and oppression.
Thanks, Dr. Howitt. More training. This is what we're doing with our principals and vice principals, both secondary and elementary this year. We introduced the book, Is Everyone Really Equal? It's a great book because it has both Canadian and American references. It's got, at the end of each chapter, it's got activities and chapter questions, and it's really thought-provoking, and we're going to do it together as a group. Next slide, please, Melissa. And you can see we're going to go all the way to the end of the year with this. And as Dr. Howitt says, our administrators, our leaders in our schools have to deal with Islamophobia. They have to deal with anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous racism, anti-Asian racism, anti-Semitism, and of course discrimination against our 2S LGBTQ plus population, to name a few. And this book really goes deep. It will give us an opportunity to have common language so that we can get ahead of these things before they happen in our buildings.
And in the last slide, there is listings of some additional professional development that we're working on. Actually, tomorrow, late in the day, I have a meeting with OPC around a session for administrators in terms of microaggressions, as well as a facilitated book club with the book by Mohammed Khalifa on culturally responsive school leadership. We have inquired with Karen Murray from the TDSB and Dr. Nicole West about 3 sessions on anti-Black racism. They may be fully booked for the year. We're still trying to work out the details on that, and if they are, we're going to be booking them for the following year. The senior team and managers have done ICCT training with Indigenous Cultural Competency training, level 1 and 2. We're looking into doing level 3 and 4 and looking into getting training for our administrators in level 1 and 2. The DEI upstander training, like we have a character education lead, like we have an anatomagique individual from every school, we're looking for a DEI upstander to engage in a minimum of 4 times of training in the year to be an advocate at the school to support their peers in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. In February, we have our administrator conference, which I have no doubt will be infused with DEI. In February, the PD Day for secondary will be on assessment through an equity lens. On June 29th is another PD Day. We had originally Danielle Campo coming to speak to us tomorrow, but she has had complications and she will be joining us in June. So we're still building that schedule. And then we're looking at poverty training and the work of Paul Gorski for our staff. Again, another area of intersectionality to be acknowledged. We do tribes training, but we're looking to expand that because that's really about safe spaces in our classrooms for our students. And we are re-infusing NTIP diversity training this year. So that's some of the work that we've been doing since the spring. Any one of us would be glad to answer any questions.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
I just wanted to note that was presented, that information was presented to the Anti-Black Racism Committee on August 24th, just so that they're updated on some of the work.
Thank you very much for that, that additional information as well. So do I have questions from trustees? I do see one from Trustee Burgess. Trustee Sartori will be next. Go ahead, Trustee Burgess.
Through you, Madam Chair, if I could, there was a slide, if you could go back to the original one that had the sort of like the overview of the committee, what they wanted to do through the year. Okay, that one. Nope, that's it. We'll be seeking members of the staff, et cetera, whatever. One of the things I would love to see the committee do that I don't see really reflected there, it might be inherent, you have to tell me, but is, and I heard it from the community at the meeting in June, and it's about suspensions and expulsions and policing Black lives, and how it's disproportionate and how that's a systemic barrier. I heard that really clearly. And I don't see it necessarily reflected right there. It might be, but I'm wondering if the committee will, in some very private way, I don't know how, but determine whether we do have a bias, a disproportionate bias. It would mean self-identity. It would mean, a lot of different things, but I would not want that to slip by.
If I could, Trustee Burgess, through you, Madam Chair, we will be engaging in a diversity audit, which is one of the things that we're going to be looking at, and I suspect that will become something that's part of that, the issue of policing, the issue of suspension and expulsion and proportionate, the way that that is happening. So I want to assure you that that will be considered.
And I had a question because I know that what we used to have was Trevlock, we would have incident reports, et cetera. Please refresh me what the new thing is.
It's called Aspen.
Aspen. I keep forgetting the name. Does that capture that? And did we have any legacy information from Trevlock to see what our systemic track record was for the last 5 years or whatever prior to going to Aspen? Or did we start fresh? Because that would be very interesting to mine, if there was any identification there.
I think I'm going to answer this, and Superintendent Mills will probably correct me. I do believe we have that data because it was suspension expulsion data that we would have from the past, and that we obviously would have that in our new system. So if they are comparable, I think that would be possible, but you know more about the system.
Correct.
Thank you very much. Trustee Sartori, and then I have Trustee Hatfield after that.
Thank you. So thank you for that excellent presentation. And there looked like there were some really important things happening in equity, diversity, and inclusivity across the board, and I really appreciate that. I'm wondering if I can ask if there are any updates on the new General Amherst and Western Secondary School naming committee. Are there any new updates over the summer? I know that, and I appreciate you all answering my questions, as I have had a few over the summer, and I wonder if there are any updates that we can, just include the public on now at this time too.
Thank you for the question, Trustee Sartori, through you, Madam Chair. Yes, we did have some conversations over the summer, and thank you for your questions. We will be meeting for the naming committee. I think it's September 14th would be when the naming committees, that is published on the board website. I know some of the concerns that have been raised. I think, Superintendent Howard, you and I talked about having something at General Amherst, some kind of flag or banner that would be, and I think that's arranged. And I don't know if Trustee Leclerc is on the call still. But I know that we would be having invited guests to the meeting just to kind of re-examine where we are with the names and different perspectives. So I think that was his intent. I don't want to speak for him, but that's sort of my update.
I will share that we consulted with the IEC about a flag going up, and a member of the IEC graciously agreed to donate a flag to be done at General Amherst.
Thank you. And supplemental, has there been any consideration for the school name as it currently stands? And again, I know that we've had a couple of conversations about that through the summer. We know the history of Jeffrey Amherst at this point. I appreciate that this is an opportunity to look at different names going forward with the new school, but I know as well that throughout on Ontario, maybe I'll say throughout Canada, I'm not sure if that's entirely accurate, but there have been, some efforts to change school names at the time that are currently in existence and continuing to stay in existence, but as well as looking at what can be done in the interim while that new sort of school name process is happening, and even an entire university is looking at changing its name as well, which is currently Ryerson University. And I just hope that there is some consideration to the current school name as it stands. I don't know when the new build, I don't recall when it will be completed specifically, but until that time with the current, school name out there, again, looking at if there is any discussion about that.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I know that you and I have had discussions about that, and I think the plan is to open, I should know this off the top of my head, but September 2022 is the date that the new Amherstburg, the school in Amherstburg, because it's not named yet, I got to be clear, will be opened. The naming and renaming of schools is the role of the Board of Trustees, as I understand it. I do know there has been concern about that, so I would suspect that is probably something that would come through the Board of Trustees. I don't mean to presume that, but I think that that's the way it would work, and that it wouldn't be within the operational work of the board. So that's where I would see it fitting, and I don't know if Trustee Leclerc wanted to speak to that at all, because that's certainly his area, and he's on the new school naming committee, or is chairing that. I don't want to presume.
I can speak to that. I can speak to that.
Go ahead, Trustee Leclerc, we can hear you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think what's critical is that we understand that we are in a process of naming a new school, and that the name that currently exists on the existing school has existed for whatever period of time, and that name will, in all likelihood, come to an end at that point. At least I don't anticipate it moving forward. But I will say that it's critical that we make the public understand that we're going through a process of naming a new school that's for two different schools coming together. So I get my back up in the air a little bit when I hear people talking about the renaming of the school. Quite frankly, it's not a renaming, it's a naming of a new school, and we are working our way through that. I've had personal conversations with members of various communities within Amherstburg, and hopefully we will get to it shortly.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that addition, Trustee Leclerc. Looking to Trustee Hatfield for a question.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. When I saw the topic on the agenda, I wasn't really sure what the presentation was going to be about. So I have some questions that might not fit in exactly, but because I saw the topic, I had some things come to mind. And one was with regard to the new position that's supposed to be dealing with equity and inclusion and all of the rest, and I wondered if there'd been a hiring decision made.
Thank you for the question. We have, Superintendent Houston and I have spent a great deal of time on this, and we are working through that position. We hope to be able to do that soon. We are working to make sure that we have representation committee and that we're doing a thorough job of the look-fors and looking over the resumes and such. So that hopefully that will happen soon. We've been patiently as we're getting school up and running, but we hope to have that happening soon.
That position have a title? Or?
Yes, it does, actually. I think it's called Human Rights and Equity Officer. If I got it right, thank you.
Is there a supplemental?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So, Human Rights and
Equity Officer, I'm pretty sure.
So my question is, for many years, probably more than 20, we have had, and I think the job title has changed many times, so we have an Equity and Inclusive Education Officer in Rachel Olivero, and I thought that we might see in here where the new position fits in or where Rachel's position fits in, but I'd like to know how they're different, and I guess I go back to the June meeting as well, because it was very I found it very upsetting, the presentations that we had that night from every group that we deal with, students, parents, Black community, and our own staff, all telling us the same thing, that our consultations weren't meaningful. And so I wonder how we've changed the way we're doing our interactions, I guess, with our diverse communities. Because, you know, we've had someone in the position for more than 20 years. We used to get annual reports on what that position or what Rachel was doing and the activities and the interactions with the committee, and those reports stopped coming to us. And it's great that we're doing professional development activities with our staff. But I think that as a trustee, I'm not feeling like I really know where we're going with this, the direction of the new staff person. I don't know if that's even going to be discussed in the staff training. And I want to know how we're changing our interactions with our diverse community. I heard something about the training that we're doing was shared with our in-house committee, but I don't know what you're doing about sharing it with the communities that are impacted, and whether or not our training for our staff is hitting the mark on where they think that we have problems with systemic barriers. So I don't know where that consultation is happening, and what we heard in June was that it wasn't happening in a meaningful way. So I'm just wondering if somehow...
You asked a lot of questions.
I know.
And through you, Madam Chair, I can try to answer some of
I
them.
was just thinking
First of all, that
myself.
presentation in more detail was presented to the Anti-Black Racism Committee, which is a community committee about the professional
So we have
development.
people from the community.
Yeah, I think there were 30 people
Yeah,
at that.
I don't know.
Certainly, Trustee Higginson and I have met with the Black community this summer on a couple of occasions. What else did you ask me there? Around the equity position. Okay, we have to see, really have working out the skill base of that person, because it could be, of a different background. So I think where the person fits, but they will be the ministry position, advertised, has a position in a number of school boards. They will be, in speaking with a number of people across the province, they will be more a part of the senior team. They will sit with us and look at things from an equity lens and raise questions around that. They will have, I hope, a strong human rights background. So it will be different, I believe, than the work that is presently happening through diversity. There's lots of work to do, certainly in both professional development, human rights training, development of policy, all of those things, I believe would, again, we're working through those things. There's different structures. I spent most of my summer looking at different structures and different positions and talking to people about how they work differently within different communities, but is, of course, an important piece of this job to reach out to community. I think with our Indigenous community, for example, we have done some good work, lots more to do. But again, there's regular meetings with that community. But again, we've got lots of reach out to do, and the consultation is really, really very important. Like, for example, the question raised by Trustee Sartori, we are communicating with the IAC to be able to see their thoughts on things. Did I miss some? I'm sure you asked me way more than that.
I'm still not sure on the distinction between the two positions, even, I guess.
I think they'll be quite different.
One will be based more on the individual skill level that's going to be hired, but like I know that the position that we've had for all these years also covered human rights. I know that we used to get workshops and little lectures before we were involved in any hiring procedures on human rights points. But so I guess I just, maybe not tonight, but maybe
sure
could elaborate on the distinction between the two positions and not necessarily the distinctions between the individuals' skills, because I believe it should be
Yeah,
the
if you look at the
position.
job description for the Equity and Inclusion
Yeah, I
Officer
did.
position, it's pretty, a senior level position. We're
Yeah.
working closely with the senior team, so I see it as a bit different.
Yeah, I did look at that, and I looked at Rachel's as well, and I couldn't see it. Well, I couldn't see the big distinction, so that's why
That is
I'm
to be,
asking.
that is to be worked out.
Yeah.
Similarly, when we hire senior administrators, the people on this team are all distinctly different, and sometimes we're hiring for where there would be extra expertise and skills.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking the
Yeah.
question, so.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate
Okay.
the question.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. I do have Trustee Sipkar with a question on the phone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Trustee Hatfield. You teed up a couple of my questions, actually. And also thank you to administration for putting together this presentation so we know where things are at. I echo the sentiments that, there was a lot of comments that expressed a lot of concern, and I feel like we're really putting our best foot forward with a lot of this professional development and new positions and committees that are being formed. My question relates to the policy side of things as well as our strategic plan. And I guess the question that I would have is, I know we have a pending motion for our September board meeting around more of the planning side of things, but from the policy side of things, I'm wondering how some of these pieces connect in there. So to be more specific, the Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee and the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee are two different, committees. One is external, one is a little bit more internal. How are those committees in practice going to be able to comment and, I would actually argue, co-create policies in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space in our board?
I'll start that question, and if anybody else wants to join. But the idea of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee is it would be representatives of our staff that walk with varied lived experience. Part of their job would be to review policy and to consult with other groups. So that committee would be consulting with the Anti-Black Racism Committee. That committee would be consulting with the Indigenous Education Advisory Committee. There would be consultation from that committee outward to our community partners. And then from there, the work in terms of the development of the policy would eventually come to the policy committee for the Board of Trustees. But the senior team writes the policy. We look at what other districts are doing, and from there we bring it to the committee as one point, and then consult with other external groups that liaise with us.
Okay, thank you. I guess one of the things I maybe would like clarity on, and maybe it's not for tonight, but it's for a different time, is just maybe the lines of communication and maybe direct, and maybe that's part of the policies that we develop, is that, one of the things that we heard was that people weren't aware that they were being consulted for X, Y, and Z. And I just think that having a really clear mandate around these pieces, meaning like the committee's mandate to be consulted on policies, all those things, I think would strengthen some of these endeavors and these initiatives, so that we make sure that we're really hearing from our community loud and clear, and we're not bringing forward, policies that haven't been properly vetted. And I would again use the word co-create, because I really do believe that, the feedback that we hear from the different individuals, whether it's the DEI committee or the Anti-Black Racism Committee, really need to be strengthened in policy, and that's part of our role. So I just want to make sure that those lines are clear in terms of accountability and things like that.
I think that's something we do need to make clear in terms of reference mandates for those committees, and further to that, with a new person being hired, how they intersect with all of that and oversee some of that work. So your point is well taken. Thank you, Trustee Sipkar.
Thank you very much, Trustee Sipkar, for that. Any other questions from trustees? Trustee Chin, go ahead.
Oh, I have a question. Actually, I have mentioned several times before, and the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, and I suppose it does not include the Indigenous people and the Black people, and I wonder if the anti-Asian issues and anti-Chinese issues. I didn't see any, policies and rules regarding that. And I do know that the provincial government has already ordered to put the Chinese history and Chinese contribution to, Canadian Chinese Canadians, in the teaching plan. But where is it? So I cannot see anything. I wonder if I can have a summary or report about what's the situation of that, and what what method have we choose to handle this issue, because we cannot just say that and we do nothing. And obviously in history, the Chinese suffered a lot, and they did contribute a lot. So even the Prime Minister say sorry to Chinese before, many years ago. So I don't know why it's kind of ignored. So I would like to have an answer for that. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have a great answer for you, but you are correct. We do need to be inclusive. We do need to understand, and there's lots to learn. And I think that is a consideration for us in going forward. But thank you for your comments. I do agree. Thank you.
Further to that, I wonder, Superintendent Canty, there was a slide in there that talked about, I don't know whether it was the lived experience of some of our self-selected members. I don't know if there was anything that you touched on. I do recall touching on that at some point in the discussion.
Yes, I believe that was Dr. Howitt. This here, that's the assessment so that when people come forward, staff members come forward, we can ensure that those that have lived experience, we want to give them a higher priority in terms of getting them on the committee. Dr. Howitt?
Exactly. We want people to self-identify because we're hoping for a spectrum of individuals, people of color, the Black community, the 2S LGBT community, the Asian community. We want representatives there that are representatives of the students that we serve, and that the lived experience, the lens, they understand. So as we bring this work forward, that is, really shrouded in white supremacy, that they see it through the lens that they walk through, and help us to see the unintended actions that we do and to dismantle them. That's the only way that we're going to go forward. So the idea of people self-identifying will help us in deciding who sits on that committee, so that there is a spectrum of individuals representative of the students that we serve.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Any other questions from trustees? I did have one. And Trustee Sipcar touched on it a little bit, and I'm seeing all these, I'm fascinated by the amount of work being done, and then the things that kind of we have going, and I'm struggling to keep them all straight, as I'm sure that you guys are as well. So I'm wondering, from a trustee perspective, as we're looking to see the evidence of these things, and we are looking to make sure that we are governing a board that is actively dismantling these racist practices and the pieces that we are committed to, and so some of that work that we do is when we receive our operational plan and some of the updates that we get at Education Committee and here in this room. And so making some of those connections, as Trustee Sipcar kind of referred to, the connections between what our committee work does, what our policies look like, the feedback that we're getting, some of the consultations that we're getting, making that very transparent. So I'm wondering what we see as some of the updates of this work and the continuing work that will come from it, about our committee work, about upstanders, about our ongoing training, and how they'll appear in things like the operational plan, or how we see them coming back to this board as updates, in whatever fashion, that trustees will be able to kind of keep track of the work that's happening, and the kind of transparency that's being able to be viewed by the communities that are affected by this, and for us to be able to determine the kind of resources that we need to put towards some things.
That's a big question too, and a good question. I think being a parent through the operational plan, but then also through reports that I think are clearly articulated by links to the strategic plan, and what outcomes we're expecting, and then how those are demonstrated and measured are critical. Do you want to add to that? But that's how I see us, and you know, reminding us that that's the kinds of things that you need to see, because this is a journey, and it's going to be a long journey, and it's going to be a journey that's going to challenge us. But we, you know, need to be looking through an equity lens at all of this, and how the work that we present to the Board of Trustees comes through that lens. So it will be something that I think that you can expect and question us on.
Thank you. I'm grateful for that. I know as a board, sometimes that we are, you know, we get focused on the things that we are operationally doing and that we are strategically doing, and it's good to be, for all of us, to remind each other that we should be looking at these things through an equity lens. And so I can appreciate that you're looking for us to remind you, and we will be looking to be reminded to do that work ourselves through an equity lens as well, and the work that we do on behalf of our students and staff in our communities here. So thank you. Thank you for that. Anyone else with a question? Thank you very much for that report and that work and that ongoing work. So we have reached the end of our meeting this evening. I thank you guys very much for committing the time tonight, for gathering us all together and making sure that we were able to tackle these things before start of school. Thank you to our administrators, our staff, everybody who's preparing to go back to class. And everybody who's been doing work over these last 18 months and even before that. And thank you to the director, to our senior administrative team, to our principals, vice principals, teachers, education staff, everybody that's in their schools. Thank you to parents who are paying attention and trying to work with us and adjust as we move along. And thank you to my colleagues here for the fulsome discussion that we had tonight. And I will see you all September 21st, if not before. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, Alicia.
Long
Thank you.
Is now exiting.